Chapter 14. A few days later, early in the morning, birds were chirping. The weather was clear. The sun shone through the gaps between the leaves, and the faint mist in the forest sprinkling on the ground. A young man and a young girl stood side by side, looking at the cave with complicated emotions on their faces. The young man had blonde hair, fair skin, and a strong body. He wore chainmail, looking alert and spirited. The young girl wore a purple hooded robe with some black curly hair spilling out of the hood. She had wheat-colored skin, a delicate face, and a pair of purple eyes that were especially eye-catching, shining like gems. It was Jean and ZD. A few days ago, the two of them had escaped to this place under the pursuit of the poisonous fire bees. After a narrow escape, the two of them were lucky enough to escape with their lives. After that, they healed and rested in the cave. This cave became a temporary safe camp, allowing them to breathe. However, although the cave was warm, it was not their home. Let's go. After taking one last look at the cave, Jean took the lead and turned around, striding into the forest. ZD followed closely behind. Unlike when they escaped here before, the two of them were carrying large bags on their backs. These bags contained large amounts of animal bones, meat floss, and ores. In addition, there were several spears and short spears. Jean's original long sword had been lost by the bonfire. The only dagger he had was broken by the sharp skull of the brown monkey bear when he was killing it. Therefore, these days, ZD and Jean worked together to forge some spears and short spears. The spears were about 1.8 meters long, and the short spears were about 1.5 meters long. The spears were to be held by hand, and the short spears were to be thrown. The bodies of the spears were made of wood from the vicinity of the cave. These trees resembled ironwood, and their texture was as hard as iron. It was very difficult to make these spears with just the golden needles, so ZD's corrosive potion played a huge role. Compared to swords and sabers made of real steel, the value of these spears was very low. Whether in terms of toughness or sharpness, they were not as good as swords and sabers. But there was no other way. Jean was now seriously lacking in weapons. The only intact dagger he had was in ZD's hands. Before leaving, ZD wanted to give the dagger to Jean, but the latter refused. ZD's dagger was a little special. It was used to process materials. ZD wanted to use it when concocting potions. At the same time, if she was in danger, ZD could use it to defend herself. In the wild, even if Jean wanted to, it was impossible for her to protect her completely. Therefore, this required ZD to have a certain degree of self-protection. By Jean's hands is buys. Actually, the bear's is. However, the strange thing was that after the brown bear died, its claws quickly collapsed and turned into a charcoal-like existence. Not only was there a lack of weapons, there was also a lack of defensive equipment. ZD was wearing an apprentice's robe. It only had a weak magical defense. Facing the beast's bite, her defense was quite worrying. Jean's pair of vambraces had been abandoned. In the fight with the brown bear, they played the last defensive role. Without them, Jean's would have been smashed. In short, the pair of vambraces were severely deformed. One of them was almost completely broken. They could only be reforged. Jean still lacked a helmet. The chainmail on his upper body was his only consolation. Jean took the lead and explored the way in front. ZD brought up the rear. The two gradually entered the forest. Their first goal was to find the campfire that was attacked by the poisonous bees. This was a well-thought-out decision. Jean's sword was left there. Although the sword was not easy to use, it still had an irreplaceable value. More importantly, only by returning to the campfire could ZD find the original path that she led the guards to search and rescue. There were a few temporary camps along the original path, each with a small amount of supplies. Because of Jean and ZD's hard work, they had plenty of food, but not much water. During the journey after Jean woke up, other than finding a few water bags, they did not have the chance to get drinkable water. Although they had crossed the river, there were terrifying python vines in the river. The risk of getting water was too high. Around the cave, there was even less water. There was not much water left in the water bags. This was one of the main reasons why the young boy and girl were urged to leave the cave. The trees were straight. ZD found that the deeper they went into the forest, the taller and thicker the trees were. Some of the trees were even 50 to 60 meters tall. The sunlight here did not penetrate like a pillar. In the thick white fog deep in the forest, the sunlight became weak and diffused everywhere along with the white fog. The fog was also filled with the fresh smell of grass and trees. Birds were flying in the canopy. Occasionally, woodpeckers could be seen standing on tree trunks at least 3 meters above the ground. The sound of the birds pecking at the wood made the forest even more serene. Soon, the two were completely deep in the forest. There were trees in all directions. Jinjin and ZD stopped and began to make marks. ZD used a dagger to cut marks on the tree trunks close to the ground. Jinjin took out a piece of animal skin and used charcoal as a pen to draw a map. This was to prevent getting lost. It was very easy to get lost in the forest because the trees looked the same. The elves were very talented in this aspect. It was said that no young elf would get lost in the forest. The forest was like a home for the elves. The consequences of getting lost were very serious. The wild was not friendly to humans, so getting lost in the forest was often the beginning of death. Jin Jun carefully puts the animal skin and the charcoal pen into his arms. This was already the 14th time he was drawing. There was a small piece of black handwriting in the center of the animal skin. It was very rough. When Jin set off again, there was a slight hesitation on his face. After walking for so long, according to common sense, he should have found the traces of him carrying ZD all the way. But no, the surrounding environment was full of the aura of nature. There were no traces at all. Jin kept thinking about it secretly. At that time, he was carrying ZD and running crazily at night. Although the situation was urgent, he did not pay too much attention. But according to his feeling, it did not take long for him to find cave. According to the time and speed, he did not run far. The bonfire should be nearby. Let's go this way. Jin was still leading the way. He chose to go to the left. The strategy he adopted was more conservative and cautious. He used the cave as the center to search for possible traces of hiding. The advantage of doing so was obvious. It was that there would be no oversights. At noon, the sun was obviously warm, and the fog in the forest gradually dissipated. The vision was much clearer, but the teenager's face became more and more ugly. He looked at the map in his hand. Every once in a while, he recorded the distance in the forest. Now the marks on the map had formed a large circle around the cave. After such an intensive search, he still did not find a single trace. There's something wrong with this place, ZD said in surprise. This forest is too big. The place they were traveling in was obviously a rainforest. The air was humid and stuffy. Low shrubs covered the forest, and countless vines intertwined with each other. And now this area was a forest. Although they were all trees, these trees were very straight. There were few vines, and there were also fewer shrubs and ferns than in a rainforest. Jin, of course, also noticed this. He originally thought that the forest was very small. Because it was located near the cave, the strange, scorching mineral vein created a very different landscape from the surroundings. But now the forest was too big. It was far beyond the teenager's estimation. According to the flight route, the terrain of the island should be a rainforest, which was normal. At the same time, Jin clearly remembered that the surroundings were also densely covered by a rainforest during the first half of their escape that night. The beast that was suspected to be a black panther pounced down from a tree branch that was obviously a rainforest. But not long after, ZD discovered the cave and reminded him. After discovering the cave, I immediately changed the direction of my run. At that time, I should have entered the forest from the rainforest. Jin was sure that his memory was not wrong, because he had also compared his memory with ZD's. According to his memory, the forest was only a small part. The surrounding landscape was a huge rainforest. But after a whole morning of exploration, the strange facts were placed in front of the two of them. They were puzzled. It seems that this island is very strange. Not only are wild beasts emerging in an endless stream, but their species are also very strange, as if they were pieced together. Moreover, the plants are also very dangerous, and the landscape is also very likely to undergo strange changes. Just as ZD was speaking, a black shadow suddenly attacked from the towering tree crown. The black shadow was slender and extremely fast. It pierced through the air and made a whooshing sound. But Jinjin's speed was even faster. In an instant, the long spear stabbed. The black shadow's momentum came to an abrupt stop. Its thick and short neck was pierced by the tip of the spear and hung on the long spear. This was a strange bird. It was about the size of an adult's fist and was covered with a layer of black feathers. The feathers were very hard, as if they were made of iron. The heavy feathers also made it lose the ability to fly. But at the same time, it also trained the bird's strong muscles. This kind of bird usually lurked in the bushes. When it found animals walking in the forest, it would often jump down and use its legs and wings to speed up. It cleverly used gravity to peck through the animal's head. After the animal died, it would suck the animal's brain, blood, eyeballs, and finally flesh. After encountering it a few times, ZD named it the iron-feathered bird. The iron-feathered bird's body was almost flawless. There was only one spot, which was the neck below the bird's head. The feathers here were very fine and had the weakest defense. At this moment, Jin's spear tip accurately pierced through the iron-feathered bird's neck. This was a fatal blow. Soon, the struggling iron-feathered bird stopped moving. Jin aimed the long spear at the ground and stabbed it hard. The iron-feathered bird's corpse was fixed. ZD went forward and took out a dagger to dissect it. The iron-feathered bird was very hard. It was an excellent material. In addition, some of the iron-feathered bird's blood would also be collected by the girl. As for the iron-feathered bird's flesh, it was not much and its value was quite low. ZD did not hesitate to throw it away. While the girl was collecting materials, Jin held the short spear and stood guard beside her to prevent other beasts from attacking. The first time he encountered this kind of iron-feathered bird, the youth was a little flustered. He first used the long spear to sweep the iron-feathered bird to the ground. The iron-feathered bird could not fly, but its speed on the ground was very fast. Jin threw 3 short spears in succession, which slowed down the iron-feathered bird's speed. Finally, Jin used the long spear to forcefully pierce the iron-feathered bird's belly. The tip of the long spear was thus destroyed. But now, Jin's technique was more and more sophisticated. He found that the iron-feathered bird was the most threatening when it came down from the tree. But at the same time, it exposed its neck in the air, which was also the time when the iron-feathered bird was the weakest. With this discovery, the iron-feathered bird was no longer a threat. Every time it appeared, it became a contribution. In addition to the iron-feathered bird, there were many other dangers in the forest. Among the fallen tree trunks and rotten leaves, there were often venomous vipers hidden. The motionless plants must not be relaxed. For example, a very inconspicuous moss poisoned Jin when his skin accidentally came into contact with it. Green spots began to grow on Jin's face. These spots were round and small, and he did not feel anything. After ZD found out, she immediately gave Jin an antidote. Unexpectedly, it could only alleviate the symptoms but not cure them. The two of them could only search quickly to find the culprit. ZD used the moss, and after a simple modulation, she added it into the antidote. Only then was the poison in Jin's body eradicated. All kinds of hidden dangers greatly hindered the progress of the youth and the girl's exploration. Jin looked up at the gradually darkening sky and had to make a helpless decision. Let's go back to the cave to rest. Chapter 15. Staying overnight in the forest was obviously more risky than staying in the cave. Although going back to the cave required a longer journey, the benefits outweighed the costs. ZD also agreed with this suggestion. Thus, on the evening of their departure, the young man and the girl returned to the cave. The cave was quite warm, but they still did not light a fire. They drank a little water and ate a lot of meat floss. The water storage was getting smaller and smaller, and it was the most necessary resource for the human body, so the young man and girl tried to save as much as possible. However, there was a lot of meat floss, so they did not need to worry too much. Both of them tried their best to avoid starvation. Starvation was full of risks. If they were starved for a long time, they would be physically exhausted. A lack of physical strength would cause people to fall into fatal danger on this island where danger lurked everywhere. In the cave, both of them did not make a sound and ate in silence. Looking at the familiar cave wall, Jean smiled bitterly. Not long ago, after talking with ZD, he understood his situation and understood that he had more things to do. Previously, he thought that if he could keep his life and escape from this strange island, it would be good enough. After that, he understood that if he escaped alone, or if he escaped with ZD, it would still be a failure. He needed to compete for the position of the White Sand City Lord, revitalize his family, and cooperate with ZD to maintain the remnants of the Purple Vine Chamber of Commerce. Thus, he needed to gather the remaining people on this island and save them as much as possible for his own use. There was also a key person among them, Scab. If he was still alive, he should give him a helping hand to deepen his goodwill. In short, he needed subordinates. Without the help of his subordinates, he and ZD would be alone. Even if they reached the White Sand City, it would be impossible for them to control the city. Thus, when he left in the morning, the young man had many grand plans and long-term plans in his heart. He did not expect that after a day of exploration, the result would be like this. There wasn't any good progress at all, so he returned to the starting point with his tail between his legs. Reality was always cruel. The two finished their dinner and began to organize their equipment. The spear had been used many times, so many of them needed to be repaired. This kind of simple equipment had to be repaired in time, otherwise, its power would be greatly reduced. In fact, even swords needed to be polished and maintained frequently. Of course, the repair of wooden spears was far more frequent than that of swords and sabers, and the time it could be used was also shorter. Jean first used the potion that ZD gave him to soften the spear to a certain extent. Then, he used his only dagger to sharpen the tip of the spear. He was multitasking, repairing the spear while recalling his experience during the day. My strength has increased. Jean recalled the scene of him killing the iron-feathered birds time and time again. At that time, he felt that it was very easy. Now that he thought about it, he realized that he could handle it with ease. These performances wouldn't have been possible in the past, but now he was able to do it. Is it because I have recovered my memory and mastered the 100-needle wind fighting technique? After recovering his memories, Jean discovered that he had a special fondness for thrusting, and it was very convenient for him to use it. Unlike when he was fighting against the poisonous fire bees, when his memory had just emerged, he was purely improvising on the spot. These days, he had practiced many times in the cave. He was very proficient in using the 100 needles fighting technique. Not only did his speed increase, but what was more commendable was that his every stab was very stable. Of course, equipment was also very important. The first time, he used a long sword. Although the blade was sharp, it was very awkward to use and even painful. On the other hand, the spear was far better at using a fighting technique like the 100 needles fighting technique than a long sword. The spear was lighter than a long sword, and, at the same time, the spearhead was sharp, so was the closest to a sword. But for the 100 needles fighting technique, I still need to use fighting chi to be able to unleash its true power. Thinking of this, Jean was faced with an old problem again. When can I use fighting chi? Jean didn't have the slightest confidence in the answer to this question. Fighting chi. Fighting chi. This was very important. Without fighting chi, with just his flesh and blood, Jean had no carapace, no sharp claws, and no sharp teeth. Usually, it would be very difficult for him to defeat a dark iron-level magical beast. And when there were a lot of bronze-level magical beasts, Jean could only run. If he could use fighting chi, Jean's combat power could directly surpass that of a dark iron-level magical beast. Fighting chi would be a great help in increasing defense, jumping, and so on. It would be a great help in the challenge of survival. The chances of both of them surviving on this island would be greatly increased. However, Zhang Jin's current situation was a little awkward. There was a problem with his memory, and it seemed that he could only wait for this memory to surface before he could use the fighting chi in his body. In the past, he still hoped that he would be able to subconsciously use fighting chi in a life and death situation. But in the end, the battle with the monkey-tailed brown bear made him completely understand that this idea was just wishful thinking. Zhang Jin didn't even know if his real cultivation level was silver level or gold level. Moreover, even if the relevant memory surfaced, the special environment he was in would also be an important determining factor. This island prohibited the use of low-level supernatural powers. ZD couldn't use dark iron-level magic. Low-level magical tools were also ineffective. The effects of high-level magical tools were also greatly reduced. From the guards, ZD also knew that it was the same for bronze-level and dark iron-level fighting chi. They were restrained by the environment. Even if Zhang Jin could recall, could he use silver-level or maybe gold-level fighting chi in such an environment? This was definitely a problem. Zhang Jin couldn't help but shake his head slightly, as if he wanted to throw this worry out of his mind. It's useless to think too much. It will only increase my frustration. At least now, even if I don't have fighting chi, I can still win against the poisonous fire bees with difficulty. Zhang Jin carefully evaluated the strength of both sides and came to this conclusion. It was quite comforting. In fact, he was already close to success when he fought against the poisonous fire bees by the bonfire. He was only chased by the last remaining swarm of poisonous fire bees. Now, Zhang Jin's strength had indeed increased by a few notches. It was very possible for him to defeat the original poisonous fire bees. However, the current situation was far more complicated than when he fought against the poisonous fire bees. This island was too strange. Fighting chi and magic were prohibited, causing the young boys and girls to have their hands and feet tied. The fact that the landscape could change was even more mysterious and unfathomable. If possible, Zhang Jin would rather be able to face the poisonous fire bees himself. Unlike now, where he was facing the entire vast nature. This made him unable to start. Thump, thump, thump. ZD buried her head and continuously pounded the bottom of the hemispherical pit with long rocks. In this pit that was dug out, there were still the materials that she had collected during the day. Most of them were leaves, but there was also a small portion of grass roots. They seemed to have been torn apart as much as possible, then pounded by rocks, and finally turned into a ball of paste. Then, the young girl took out a bottle of medicinal powder from the small leather pouch at her waist. She carefully poured out only a little bit of the medicinal powder. Just a little bit of the medicinal powder. When it came into contact with the ball of paste at the bottom of the pit, it caused the latter to quickly melt and turn into a pool of sticky, dark red liquid. The young girl immediately used a tree branch to reach in and stir continuously. After stirring for a while, she stopped and quietly observed. When the upper layer of the liquid at the bottom of the pit began to solidify, she used a tree branch to pry open this layer of dryness, revealing the lower layer of liquid, and then continued to stir. Every time after prying open, the lower layer of liquid that was revealed would be brighter in color than before, and the liquid also seemed to be clearer. When ZD stirred again, she would also change to another clean tree branch. In this way, after prying open layer after layer of hard shell, the final liquid was no longer dark red, but turned into a translucent pink. After reaching this level, ZD seemed to be relieved. She no longer tried to pry open the surface that was gradually hardening, but instead allowed the entire liquid to solidify. By the second day, the liquid in the pit had already completely dried up. ZD thoroughly pounded this piece of powder, forming a pool of fine pink powder. She then used a wide leaf to separate the powder and wrapped it up, forming small, exquisite medicine packets. She handed some of these small medicine packets to Zhang Jin and introduced them. These medicinal powders can leave traces. The bright pink color will be very conspicuous in the forest. Whether it is sprinkled on tree trunks or stones, it will stay for a long time. Even if it is washed away by heavy rain, it will stubbornly remain for a few days. There was no doubt that this was a good thing. Although magic was forbidden here, the use of these medicines was purely based on physical properties. Although ZD's level of pharmaceutics was not at the master level, her spirituality made Junjin praise. After breakfast, the two continued on their journey. They had enough rest that night, and their physical and mental strength were full. They also had dry powder, so it was easier for them to make marks. At the same time, the spears were also replenished. Although the number did not increase, the ratio was adjusted. There were more spears, and the number of short spears decreased. It turned out that the young boy and girl thought that spears would be a hindrance when walking in the rainforest. However, after the landscape changed, the forest was more spacious. The trees were tall and straight, and the branches were slanted, but it was not as disturbing as imagined. In the process of exploration, spears were more useful. For example, Jinjin used a spear to beat the grass and startle the snake. The spear was longer, so even if the snake was startled and counterattacked, it would give a young boy more time to react. In addition, the two also had a discussion about the traces on the animal skin map in the middle of the night. The second time they set off, they changed their previous strategy. They no longer searched around the vicinity of the cave, but focused on one direction. The direction they had chosen now vaguely seemed to be the direction they came from. This was the identification they made at night through the stars in the night sky. The two were not sure, but in their opinion, this direction was the most likely. Chapter 16. When it came to choosing the direction, both the young man and the young woman tried their best. Looking at the stars to determine the direction was not their forte. ZD was really good at business, potions and magic were secondary. Jinjin had general knowledge, but his memory was incomplete. So far, he found that he was good at fighting. The two of them were aiming for the position of the Lord of White Sand City. Who would have thought that they would encounter a shipwreck? Who would have thought that they would end up on such a dangerous and strange island? The two of them walked in a straight line, but occasionally they would search around to confirm their current direction. Unlike yesterday, their exploration strategy was different. They quickly went beyond yesterday's exploration area and arrived at a new area. Be careful, Jinjin reminded. Beside them was a cliff, and a big tree grew on the edge of the cliff, still straight up into the sky. However, there were a lot of tree roots which were exposed on the cliff. There were also many trees growing at the bottom of the cliff, and these trees' crowns were still a few meters above the edge of the cliff. ZD nodded and followed Jinjin, carefully avoiding the cliff. The cliff was very high, and the consequences of falling were serious. Broken heads and broken bones were normal. In this forest, people's frailty was beyond imagination. Even if it was just a sprained ankle, it was very likely that they would pay the price with their lives. Because of a sprained ankle, it would cause inconvenience in movement, being unable to escape when attacked by beasts, and a series of bad consequences. Once he slipped and fell, even with Junjin's strength, he would suffer a lot. After all, he could not use his chi. Far away from the cliff, ZD looked back with lingering fear in her eyes. This kind of cliff terrain was easy to avoid during the day, but it was impossible at night. It was too difficult. A person's eyesight was very limited at night. Without the help of chi and magic, just relying on one's eyes was almost the same as being blind. When you thought that you were walking on flat and safe terrain, you would end up falling off the cliff as soon as you pushed aside the branches blocking your way. Fortunately, when we were escaping, we did not come across this kind of terrain. ZD said with relief. That's right. Jinjin also felt a lingering fear in his heart. He resonated with ZD's words. If they had fallen off the cliff that night under the pursuit of the venomous fire bees, the two of them would probably have become skeletons at the bottom of the cliff. As they moved further away from the cave, the number of such cliffs increased. The topography of the terrain became more and more obvious. This change was not entirely a bad thing. Sometimes the boy and girl would stand on the edge of a cliff, a place with a wider field of vision, and observe from afar. Of course, this was only an occasional situation. Most of the time, even at the edge of the cliff, there was a forest of trees. The canopy and branches tightly blocked the view. There were trees everywhere. It was too easy for people to get lost in such an environment. Jinjin kept marking on the map, recording the route he was taking. He drew a straight line, but in reality, was their path really a straight line? Neither the young man nor the young woman could be sure. In fact, they felt more guilty than anything. This was because they understood that without a reference, it was difficult to ensure that their path was straight. Therefore, when there was a cliff with a wider view, they would cherish it very much. It was hard for ordinary people to imagine this. Exploring the forest and taking an ordinary look into the distance would make the people in the depths of the forest happy and confident. Of course, this was also because Jinjin was not good at climbing trees. The training of the knights never taught them how to climb trees. This was not strange. Because the knights had mastered Do-Chi, they could jump up and onto the slanted branches. There was no need to train them to climb trees. When the knights fought, they were never alone. They had mounts and attendants. When the legions fought, there were already auxiliary troops scouting the way. Jinjin tried to climb trees. When he was 3 meters above the ground, he gave up. First, he had to climb close to the canopy. Only then could he climb up and look into the distance. To do this, he had to be at least 10 meters above the ground. This height was very risky. If he lost his footing and fell, he would be injured. He was a knight, the most elite temple knight under the Shengming Emperor's command, but he could not use Do-Chi. Without Do-Chi to protect his body, it was very difficult for his body to withstand such a height difference. While he was climbing the tree, if an attack came, he and ZD would be at their weakest. Secondly, climbing this kind of straight and tall tree was much more difficult than climbing the trees of the rainforest with slanted branches and tangled vines. Finally, he had to consider his own stamina. Climbing trees consumed too much stamina. If he exerted too much, he would sweat, he would be hungry, and he would need to replenish his food and water. Especially the latter, the boy and girl did not have much food left. Jinjin climbed up and looked into the distance. "Look there, there's a depression there," Jinjin said. They had to try their best to go to the depression. This kind of terrain was very likely to have water. On one hand, it could help the boy and girl replenish their water supply. On the other hand, they might be able to find a river and walk along it to get out of the forest. This was because the island was surrounded by the sea. The water would flow down and eventually merge into the sea. An ideal river would have a beach or reef at the end. After sprinkling a bag of light powder on the edge of the cliff, the boy and girl slightly changed their direction. Not long after, they came to the depression. They were disappointed that they did not find a river, nor did they find any water. This landform was like a giant bowl, and in the bowl was still a tree. However, just as the two of them were about to change their direction, they suddenly stopped. A black panther unexpectedly appeared in front of them. It had black fish scales and a horn in the middle of its forehead. It was a horned black panther. When they discovered the black panther, the latter also discovered them. For a moment, both sides were stunned on the spot. This encounter seemed to have caught both sides off guard. Jinjin quietly held his spear and could not help but feel nervous. He was not afraid of a horned black panther. It would be easy for him to injure it. But what about a group? What was even more frightening was that it was not a group of black panthers that attacked the brown bear, but a group of black panthers that were in better condition. Although most of these horned black panthers were only at the bronze level, when there were a lot of them, they could hunt as a group. They even dared to attack silver beasts like the brown bear. If Jinjin was besieged by a group of black panthers, he would have to protect ZD in a situation where he could not even protect himself. This would be very difficult to do. However, there were no good ideas at the moment. They could only act according to the situation. Both sides were motionless. The air seemed to have frozen. ZD held her breath. The pressure in her heart was increasing. Her face started to turn pale. After a short stalemate, the horned black panther suddenly turned around and slipped away. What an unexpected situation. quickly chase, it might attract the whole group of Black Panthers. In the next moment, ZD reminded in a low voice. Jean nodded. He clearly remembered that the poisonous fire bees forced a Black Panther away. In the end, the whole group of Black Panthers came for revenge and finally fought with the brown bear. Follow me. If not, before Jean could finish, he was interrupted by ZD. Don't worry. We both have potions. We can mark anywhere and meet up. ZD answered. This was the method that both of them had agreed on, to prevent both sides from getting lost. Jean opened his legs and ran quickly. Trees almost came at him, but Jean quickly dodged them all. The sound of the wind whistled in his ears. Jean was fully focused, not only locking onto the Black Panther's figure, but also taking care of his surroundings to prevent any sinister attacks. It was not night, but day. Jean's vision was very good. He breathed heavily, his heart spitting out blood to its heart's content. His blood was almost bursting, and a large number of muscles in his body were stretching and contracting, bringing about powerful kinetic energy. Jean's speed was very fast, and he quickly closed the distance between him and the Black Panther. This scaled horn Black Panther's speed was not fast. As the two sides got closer, Jean was surprised to find that the Black Panther was injured. It's injured. Could it have participated in the siege of the brown bear? Jean was slightly relieved. Because the leader of the leopard group that was heavily injured by the brown bear was dead, there were only a few left. I still have to be vigilant. What if this is just a trick by the leopard group to lure the enemy? Jean had heard ZD's retelling and knew how the sinister and vicious blue wolf had repeatedly attacked and killed the exploration team. The wild beasts on this island could not be judged by common sense. Jean would not be surprised if the horned leopard group had used the tactic of luring the enemy. Once again, to Jean's surprise, the Black Panther running in front of him suddenly stopped. It let out a whimper, circled in place, and hesitated to move forward, seeming rather impatient and uneasy. Jean gradually approached it, but the Black Panther was still the same, as if there was something hidden in the forest in front of it that brought it great fear, far more than what Jean brought it. For a moment, the young man could not help but reveal a serious expression. He was not in a hurry to attack the Black Panther, but looked around. Thus, he quickly found that the surrounding forest was darker than before. Although these trees were still tall, the leaves were pale green, and there seemed to be signs of decay on the surface of the trees. The ground was thick with dead branches and withered leaves. There was also a cold aura hidden in the air. Not noticing any wild beasts, Jean focused his attention on the Black Panther in front of him again. He walked forward slowly, and when the distance between the two of them was pulled to a certain extent, the Black Panther finally could not hold back and began to continue fleeing forward. Jean followed closely behind. Roar! They had not run far when the Black Panther suddenly let out a miserable cry. A white spider web suddenly rose from the ground and scooped up, wrapping the Black Panther inside. The spider web hung up quickly, and the spider silk was extraordinarily sticky. The more the Black Panther struggled, the more firmly it was stuck to the spider silk. Soon, the surface of the Black Panther's body was almost covered in spider silk. A light blue spider slowly descended from the canopy and onto the spider web. The main body of this spider was as big as a stone mill, but its 8 tentacles were thin and long, each at least 2 meters long. The spider landed on the spider web, and its movements were very smooth, as if it was sliding on ice. It began to work, and the 8 tentacles were like an expert playing the strings of a zither, busy but not messy, and even a trace of elegance was revealed. The spider web that originally trapped the Black Panther was still a little broken, but under the spider's patching, it quickly became complete without any holes. The Black Panther's struggling speed became slower and slower. The white spider's silk was like a bandage, firmly binding it between the trees, about 6 or 7 meters above the ground. Seeing the spider successfully hunt, Jean could not help but feel a chill in his heart. He slowly retreated, his nerves tense. The young man's gaze was not only fixed on the spider that was still patching, but also a little bit of attention to his feet. Perhaps there was a spider web hidden near him. Fortunately, after the eight-legged spider finished its hunt, it did not take the opportunity to attack him. Instead, it followed the spider's silk and went deep into the canopy, disappearing. Jean did not dare to be careless at all, and even his heartstrings were a little tense. Because in the canopy nearby, he found other prey that had been hunted. White spider's silk wrapped around them, revealing their various shapes and sizes. Most of them were in the shape of a leopard. Jean immediately guessed. Could it be that the horned black panther that was chased away by the monkey-tailed brown bear had all fallen here? He already understood that the horned black panther was afraid of this eight-legged spider. The Black Panther pack was ambushed here and almost completely wiped out. A Black Panther was lucky to escape, but it encountered Jean on the way. The Black Panther's intelligence was not enough. In a panic, it fled back to its previous place and was hunted. In addition to the panther-shaped prey, there were also spider webs in the shape of elk, fox, rabbit, and so on. There were even tigers and rhinos. Who knew why rhinos lived in this kind of landscape? When Jean saw this, his heart could not help but beat faster. Although he only saw one eight-legged spider, there were definitely many hidden in the canopy here. Otherwise, the Black Panther pack would not be wiped out by a spider. Moreover, large prey, such as rhinoceroses and tigers, could not be captured by a single spider. Normal spiders hunted alone, but this eight-legged spider seemed to live in groups. Jean was not surprised by this change in habits. Just as he was about to retreat, a weak voice suddenly floated over. "Wait, don't go. Please, please. Save me, save me." Someone was asking Jean for help. Chapter 17. Hearing the cry for help, Jean's pupils constricted. Someone is trapped in the spider web. He's still alive. Jean frowned. "I'm a knight. Saving lives and helping the weak is one of my creeds as a knight. Calm down first." The young man immediately warned himself. He stopped retreating and observed carefully. Then he changed his direction and carefully entered the spider hunting ground again. He did not step into any spiderweb traps. After changing his position, he looked up and found the spider web that was crying for help. The spider web was trembling slightly, and like the surrounding spider webs, it was tightly wrapped around the prey. The silhouette of the spider web was obviously a person. On this person's face, the spider webs were sparse, and there were cracks that allowed people to barely see. This unlucky guy was hanging in the air and had a high vantage point, so when he saw Jean, he immediately cried for help. "I beg you, save me. If you leave, I'll die. You're also from the Pig's Kiss, right? We're on the same boat. Please, have mercy. Don't leave. Don't give up on me." Jean heard this and was slightly moved. He had obtained a lot of information from ZD, and the ship they were on was indeed the Pig's Kiss. It seemed that this trap guy should be a member of the Pig's Kiss. Jean did not move. If he rashly saved him, he might get himself into trouble. If he took a step further, he might even endanger ZD. He stood still and stared at the guy who was hanging in the air. At the same time, he paid attention to the spiders hidden in the treetops. He had to be sure that this was not a trap. Jean's muscles were tense, and if there was any movement, he would immediately react. But the spiders did not move. After pleading for a while, the person realized that Jean did not move. He gradually reacted and continued to cry in a low voice, "Don't doubt me. When the wild beasts fall into the spider web, they will struggle with all their might. The more they struggle, the more spider webs will stick to their bodies, and the tighter the spider webs will become. In the end, they will suffocate and die. I didn't. I fainted at that time, and then I was covered by a spider web and tied up. That's why I'm still alive. I beg you, please save me. I don't want to die." At this point, the person crying for help let out a low sob. Being trapped in the spider web and unable to move, watching death approach step by step, this kind of fear was unbearable for ordinary people, almost driving them crazy. Jean was even more convinced by this display of human nature. The fear of death was a part of every life. Even though Jinjin was a knight who was brave enough to face the brown monkey-tailed bear head-on, he still felt fear. Fear did not mean that one was weak. Facing fear head-on at all times was true courage. Still no reaction? It seems that these spiders don't hunt by sound. Guessing in his heart, Jinjin decided to take a little risk. He called out softly, "Hey, what's your name?" The trapped person immediately became excited. "My name is Huang Zhao." "Sir, I'm Huang Zhao, a sailor on the Pig's Kiss." "Benevolent sir, kind-hearted sir, if you save me, I will do my best to repay your kindness." Jinjin's attention was still on the treetops. When he spoke, the spiders still did not move, which made him put down some of his worries and confirm that his previous guess was not wrong. Then, "Huang Zhao, how can I save you?" Jinjin asked again. This was a crucial question. He had to confirm Huang Zhao's intentions and get more information. So far, he still had doubts. Could it be that these spiders deliberately did not kill their prey and let the prey make a sound to attract the corresponding tribe? Maybe these spiders were just restraining themselves, waiting for Jinjin to go back and call more people to save them. When there were more people, the spiders would retract their web. Facing Jinjin's question, Huang Zhao said everything he knew and hurriedly reminded him, "Sir, you must not act rashly. The spiders here will fall to the ground at night and secretly lay their webs. These spider webs are buried underground. Once they're stepped on, this trap will be activated. The spider webs are raised high, causing the spiders to weave, and the prey will be hung in midair. No matter how loudly I speak, no spiders will come out. But when I struggle hard and shake the spider's silk above to a certain extent, it will attract the spiders to weave their webs again. So, once I'm rescued from the web, it will definitely attract the spiders. Each of these spiders is a bronze creature, and their strength is very terrifying. There are at least a dozen spiders nearby. The strength of these spiders pouncing is no different from a horse's charge. I was careless and was sent flying by a spider. I crashed into a tree trunk and fainted on the spot. When I opened my eyes in a daze, I was already hanging in midair, and the exploration team had already suffered a crushing defeat. The survivors were all fleeing. But these spiders also know how to cooperate. They don't just lay webs on the ground. When 2 or 3 of them work together, they can also weave a larger web in midair. However, they fall from the sky with their spider webs and directly cover their prey. These spider webs are very sticky. You need a very sharp sword and skilled skills to cut the spider webs. My brother, Lan Zhao, is the captain of the exploration team. He is an expert with a saber. I saw with my own eyes that when his saber was entangled by the spider webs, its speed was greatly reduced, and he couldn't cut the spider webs at all. Use fire. In the end, they used fire to burn the spider webs and escape. These spiders are actually quite afraid of fire. I wanted to call for help at that time, but I was dizzy and couldn't call at all. Even my vision was very blurry. I listened to the cries of these people, and then I fainted again. When I woke up, there was no more fire. I was the only one left. Jinjin listened attentively and secretly analyzed the information contained here. After a long while, he asked again, "Your name is Huang Zhao, right? How many people are in your group, and why are you here? Other than your group, is there anyone else who survived? When were you attacked?" Huang Zhao didn't hesitate and quickly answered, "The Pig's Kiss was destroyed. The waves were very big that night. We tried to control it, but the hull still broke in half. The first half of the hull hit the reef, and the survivors all came to the island's beach that night. Including our group, there are about 100 people. The captain is missing, and the first mate is commanding us. This island is very strange. Low-level magic and chi can't be used. We set up a temporary camp on the beach. The first mate assigned my brother, me, and some others to explore the island and look for wood that can be used to build the hull, as well as food and fresh water. The jungle is full of danger. We encountered many strange beasts. Our exploration team lost many people, but the harvest was very little. We gradually couldn't hold on, so we went back. On the way back, the landscape changed. It was a rainforest, but for some reason, we came to a desert. Many people thought it was an illusion, but we couldn't break free. We were very panicked, and some people even committed suicide. For a time, the team fell into chaos. Food and water were quickly consumed. I thought the whole team was finished. Fortunately, a traveler joined our team. He was an old scholar who once served a noble in the desert territory. His name was Tsang Su. He used his method to find the direction in the desert and found an oasis to replenish water. We rested in the oasis for a few days before continuing our journey. Our luck became better. We reached the edge of the desert and finally entered this forest. When we came here, we were ambushed by a group of spiders. Most people escaped, but 5 or 6 people died. When they were running for their lives, I heard my brother shouting for retreat. He must not have noticed that I was missing, so he didn't come to save me. In fact, I was captured by the spiders and used as food reserves, but I'm still alive. Huang Zhao was very emotional. Jinjin remained silent. Huang Zhao gradually calmed down and continued. I don't know how many days have passed. No one told me how long I was unconscious. But when I woke up, 3 days and 2 nights had already passed. For the sake of the Shengming Emperor, please save me. Sir, we're on the same boat. Now, only you can save me. Please have mercy. I will repay you with all my strength. Huang Zhao once again begged. There's actually a desert here? Zhen Jin was puzzled. Sir, I'm not lying to you. Absolutely not. Huang Zhao's voice rose. I know, this sounds unimaginable, but it's true. We really went to the desert, and then inexplicably came here. Zhen Jin nodded slightly and comforted. I will save you. I will do my best. But I can't do it alone. I will go back and call more people. Do you have any way to contact the previous group of people? I have a whistle. The whistle's sound can travel very far, but it's in my pocket. In addition, I also know how to use flag signals. I can stand at a high place and use flags to send out signals. Huang Zhao hurriedly said. Seeing Zhen Jin's silence, he immediately added, Secret signal. Right, I also have a secret signal. We've discussed that we will leave secret signals along the way. As long as you follow the secret signal, you will be able to find my brother and the others. Zhen Jin looked at the sky. The sky was quickly darkening. It wasn't long until evening. Wait a moment, I will be back. Zhen Jin turned around and left. Sir, I will wait for you. You must come back. Please don't forget about this pitiful person. You are my only hope. I will definitely repay you. Zhen Jin walked very far away, but Huang Zhao's shouts were still coming from behind him. He could hear that he was using all his strength to call out. His voice was hoarse, filled with fear and panic, but also with heavy expectations. After all, Zhen Jin could be considered his only chance of survival. How should he put it? The youth felt the same way. Life was so beautiful, so Zhen Jin cherished it very much. Not long ago, in front of the fire poison and the brown bear, he was also on the verge of death. In the cycle of being unconscious and waking up, he was also filled with helplessness, panic, worry, hope, and sincere repentance. Huang Zhao's expectations fell on Zhen Jin's shoulders. It was a heavy weight. How to save him? How to fight against so many spiders, at least a dozen bronze beasts? Many questions were placed in front of Zhen Jin. He shook his head slightly, his eyes firm. No matter what, let's meet up with ZD first. Not long after, the youth successfully reunited with the girl. In fact, after they separated, the girl tried her best to catch up with Zhen Jin. The horned Black Panther was not fast, and the gap between the two sides was not big. Did you encounter any danger? Zhen Jin asked. Yes. Don't worry, I'm not completely powerless. ZD nodded first, then patted the small leather bag at her waist, her face revealing a touch of pride. I found something new here. Zhen Jin simply and directly described the development of the matter and asked for the girl's opinion. After hearing this, ZD thought for a moment and replied, Sir, I suggest you save him. Although Zhen Jin also had a preference, at this moment, he was more willing to listen to ZD's real opinion. Thus, he continued to ask, Can you tell me the reason in detail? ZD's expression was solemn, her tone sincere. Sir, according to what you said, he has the aura of bronze. The bronze level is already the lower elite. Generally speaking, they could be the bosun on the ship. Those who can fight can even become the captain of the assault. Just this person alone is qualified to be recruited. Once you save him, the possibility of him working for you is extremely high. In addition, he has a brother. His brother, Lan Zhao, is the captain of this exploration team. His position is higher than his, proving that he is stronger. Subduing one Huang Zhao, it is very likely that his brother, Lan Zhao, will be involved as well. These are two bronze-level elites. They must have a group of subordinates by their side. Once the two of them join you, you will be able to subdue a group of subordinates. We need manpower now. Even if we don't consider controlling White Sand City in the future, these people can increase our chances of survival on this island. Sometimes, when we encounter danger, we just need to be able to outrun our companions. At this point, ZD's eyes flashed with a faint light. Zhenjin nodded. Is there anything else? ZD continued. We still need information. So, even if these two people don't join you, just by communicating with them, we can expand our map and deepen our understanding of this island. According to Huang Zhao, the majority of the troops are building ships to save themselves. This is also the most reliable way for us to leave here and go to White Sand City. But even if we have a ship, we don't have anyone to steer it for us. To make a ship sail on the sea for several months, we need a captain, adjutant, navigator, sailor, helmsman, ship carpenter, gunner, ship doctor, lookout, and so on. Try to save these people as much as possible. It will also make our subsequent journey safer and faster. Zhenjin and ZD did not know how to control a ship. But to save him, we will have to face at least a dozen bronze spiders. Zhenjin muttered. Sir, I already have an idea. ZD smiled. Believe me, if the cost is greater than the reward, I will not do this. Zhenjin laughed. Haha, should I say that you are indeed worthy of being the current president of the Purple Vine Chamber of Commerce? The young knight looked at ZD with admiration, his expression gradually becoming serious. You are right, but you have forgotten the most important point. ZD quickly restrained her smile and bowed. Please instruct me, sir. I am a holy knight, a knight among knights. Helping the weak, saving the dying, and healing the wounded is my creed. Even in times of danger, I will not abandon my companions. The young man's powerful words echoed in the quiet forest. For a moment, ZD looked at the young man and was stunned for a moment. Then she smiled. Sir, understand. Chapter 18. With ZD in tow, Zhenjin once again returned to the eight-legged spider's hunting ground. Sir, you're here. You really didn't give up on me. Thank the heavens. Xian Zhao's tone was full of surprise and gratitude. But soon, his mood fell again, and he could not hide his disappointment as he asked, Sir, is it just the two of you? Where are the others? Just the two of us. Zhenjin said. Sir, are you sure? Xian Zhao stammered. This was a matter of life and death, and he was very nervous. Maybe we should call more people. ZD snorted. More people? Will they come to save you or to die? You can only trust us now. Xian Zhao choked for a moment, and finally choked out. Sir, you must be careful. ZD took out bottles of potions from her small leather bag and handed them to Zhenjin. Zhenjin threw them continuously, and these potions drew an arc in the air, hitting tree trunks or stones and breaking apart, the liquid inside quickly spreading in all directions. There was a strange and unpleasant smell in the air, as if chicken feathers, dog excrement, and dried squid were mixed together and burnt. If he could use magic, he could easily rescue Xian Zhao, who was hanging in the air, by using light body spell and flight spell. In such an environment, Zhenjin and ZD used potion-based tactics. These were all combustion-supporting potions, and Zhenjin accurately threw them at key locations. After his injuries healed, Zhenjin found that his strength had increased significantly. After discussing with ZD, the latter felt that this might be the effect of the potion that was temporarily mixed with the blood of the brown monkey bear. This type of potion was not rare. The most well-known one was the strength potion. After taking this potion, the user's strength will be permanently increased. Of course, the potion's effect would decrease sharply if it was drunk too many times. There is also a possibility that the battle of life and death had awakened Jinjin's bloodline to a certain extent. Nobles were one of the most outstanding groups in the world. Because of this, they were talented and overflowing with talent. The Hundred Needles clan used to be a great aristocrat in the south, so naturally, they had an excellent bloodline. The origin of its bloodline could be traced back to the legendary level Golden Stinger Queen Bee. People with this kind of bloodline were fast and stable, and their attacks were very accurate. This bloodline did not specialize in strength, but it was possible that Junjin had other bloodlines hidden in his body. The most common bloodlines were the Dragon Bloodline, the Giant Bloodline, the Ogre Bloodline, and even the Devil Bloodline. Due to the frequent marriage alliances between nobles, their private lives were extravagant and promiscuous, and their bloodlines were intertwined. Sometimes a bloodline could be hidden for a lifetime. Coupled with the lack of an effective method to determine it, it was very difficult to determine how much bloodline a person had. Examples like Junjin's, who had experienced life and death, and then erupted with life's potential in desperate situations and awakened their hidden bloodline, were actually not rare in the history of various races. There was another possibility, which was what ZD had guessed before. Jinjin's true cultivation level was not just silver but gold. The silver level was the limit of the human body's ability. The gold level exceeded the limits of a human body and had extraordinary qualitative changes in speed, strength, recovery, and so on. If Junjin's cultivation level was gold, then it was unlikely that he was an experienced gold ranker. According to his age, he must be in the rising period. Therefore, the increase in his strength was the result of the gold level combat aura constantly nourishing his body. No matter the result, Junjin's increase in strength was a good thing. After almost using up all of ZD's combustion-enhancing potions, Junjin took out the Starfire Stone and shot out blue sparks. The sparks landed on the potion, and with a whoosh, a flame burst out. The flames spread quickly, and the combustion-enhancing potions along the way were instantly ignited, forming a burning wall of fire in the blink of an eye. The wall of fire burned fiercely and began to climb up the surrounding trees, burning higher and higher. Squeaking sounds came from the tall treetops, and the eight-legged spiders became restless. Zhuangzhao felt the air below quickly become scorching hot, and his heart could not help but beat wildly. He did not expect the young boy and girl to make such a big scene. So this girl is a potion master. But how are they going to save me? Just as Zhuangzhao was guessing, Jinjin made his move again. He took out a short spear from his back and smeared some combustion-enhancing potions on the tip of the short spear. Jinjin held the short spear and let the spear head shake slightly on the flame beside his feet, and the tip of the short spear was easily ignited. In the next moment, Jinjin raised his arm slightly and then threw it fiercely. The short spear drew a beautiful arc in the air and then accurately pierced into the body of a prey. This was a panther-shaped prey, and it had already suffocated to death in the spider web. After the short spear stabbed into it, the flames immediately spread, burning the spider web to nothing. The panther-shaped prey fell to the ground almost instantly. As Jinjin expected, this was a scale-horned black panther. Because of the scale-like armor on its body, the flames attached to the black panther were quickly extinguished. Jinjin threw out the short spears one by one, and the prey fell to the ground one by one. Some of them continued to burn, while some of the flames were extinguished. It's coming. ZD's heart trembled slightly. She saw the eight-legged spiders quickly fall to the ground with spider webs, and began to weave new webs on the fallen prey. Some of the burning prey, the eight-legged spiders, spat out a thick green liquid from their mouths, and after extinguishing the flames, they began to weave webs again. Obviously, they were not helpless against flames. Soon, no more eight-legged spiders fell to the ground. A total of 26 bronze, ferocious beasts appeared in front of the boy and girl. Most of the eight-legged spiders were trying their best to recover their dry rations, and only 3 of them pounced on Junjin and ZD. ZD secretly heaved a sigh of relief. These 8-legged spiders were wild beasts after all, and they were not as cunning as the blue wolf. This made the girl regain her superiority and confidence as a human. 3 of the 8-legged spiders approached, but Junjin stood still in the same place. When the distance reached an ideal state, Junjin calmly ignited the combustion-enhancing agent beside his left foot. The second wall of fire rose with a bang, trapping the 3 spiders in it. The spiders let out terrified cries and began to shoot spider webs at the treetops to hang themselves away. But the moment the spider webs reached the top of the flames, they were roasted. The wall of fire gradually spread, and the 3 spiders were easily forced into a desperate situation by Junjin. Left with no choice, the 3 spiders could only bury their heads and break out. They successfully rushed out of the wall of fire, and there were a few flames on their bodies. Squeak, 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 squeak. They let out a series of hurried cries, frightened and panicked. The spiders that were trying their best to recover their prey fell into chaos when they saw their 3 flaming companions running towards them. Now's the time. Junjin's eyes flashed brightly. He threw 3 short spears in a row, and the short spears emitted flames, accurately hitting the spider webs on top of the yellow algae's head. There were a total of 4 strands of spider webs hanging him, and they looked like 4 thick, snow-white hemp ropes. When the spider webs met the flames, they were almost instantly burned. The yellow algae that was hanging by the spider webs instantly lost its stable state, swayed in an arc in the air, and with a bang, hit the tree trunk. Then, Junjin's 4th short spear flew out, burning the remaining spider webs. The yellow algae let out a low cry, and his whole body fell to the ground. Although it was very painful, he was not injured, because the extremely sticky spider webs had excellent ductility. When he hit the tree trunk, the spider webs were stretched out, and he was only 2 meters above the ground. Unfortunately, an 8-legged spider that had just succeeded in hanging its prey noticed the movement here, and it immediately rushed towards the yellow algae. Seeing this scene, the yellow algae's eyes widened in shock, and then suddenly let out a low roar and took the initiative to roll into the wall of fire. The flames instantly burned the spider webs all over his body, and then began to burn his flesh and hair. But at this moment, the yellow algae showed the determination and ruthlessness of a sea man, and without a word, he continued to run through the wall of fire until he came out from another wall of fire. He successfully got rid of the 8-legged spider, but what he faced was the flames all over his body, and it was very likely that he would be burned to death on the spot. "Good," ZD blurted out in praise. "Come here quickly." Without needing her to call, the yellow algae had already subconsciously rushed towards Junjin and ZD. The distance between the 2 sides quickly closed, and ZD raised her arm, sprinkling a bottle of medicine. The blue powder sprinkled on the yellow algae's body. The yellow algae immediately let out a shrill scream. The flames on his body strangely retracted, and then were suppressed by the blue powder. The yellow algae's whole body trembled. In a short time, his face was unrecognizable, and only a small pile of his hair was left, and it was emitting thick smoke. His entire face, exposed hands, and arms were all charred black. He sucked in a breath of cold air, and in front of Junjin and ZD, he quickly ran past them. "Quickly, quickly, there's still a big one." As soon as he said that, a surging beast aura descended from the sky. Junjin and ZD both paled. This was a silver rank 8-legged spider leader. Its body was larger, and its blue hair was thicker, and its 8 spider legs were slender. It cut through the air and let out a sharp whistle, rushing towards Junjin, ZD, and the yellow algae at an astonishing speed. "You guys go first." At the critical moment, Junjin was the first to react. He angrily stared at the yellow algae, and then stepped forward with a heavy expression. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. He quickly threw out short spears. But the 8-legged spider was as fast as the wind, easily dodging these short spears. Soon, Junjin's short spears were all used up. He gritted his teeth, raised the spear high, and counterattacked the eight-legged spider leader. "Sir!" Zidi's cry came from behind. "Quickly go! Don't let us become a burden." The yellow algae also shouted. But while they were hesitating, they had already missed the opportunity. The spider leader suddenly shot out 3 strands of spider silk, accurately hitting the 3 of them. Zhenjin's spear and hands were bound by the spider silk, and he could only wrestle with the spider leader. Zidi's cloak was stuck by the spider silk, and the girl displayed the agility and flexibility of a young body. She quickly took off her cloak and bent down to pull out the dagger tied to her calf. "Sir, catch!" Zidi was just about to throw the dagger to Zhenjin when a ball of spider silk attacked. The spider silk quickly expanded in the air, forming an exquisite hunting web. The web hit Zidi, covering the girl's chest and waist, knocking her to the ground and firmly sticking to the ground. Zidi suffered from the impact, and the dagger in her hand was greatly affected. Although the dagger was thrown, it was not thrown to Zhenjin's side, but just happened to fall near the yellow algae. The yellow algae's right leg was entangled by the spider's silk, and he was lying on the ground, frantically struggling, but he could not resist the spider leader's strength and was dragged over. The yellow algae subconsciously reached out and grabbed the dagger. He pulled out the dagger and swung it with all his strength, but in his panic he missed twice, and only then was he able to accurately cut the spider silk. The yellow algae was lucky to escape and hurriedly retreated. "Quickly throw the dagger to Sir!" Zidi screamed. No, I don't want to die. I don't want to die." The yellow algae did not seem to hear, and he madly shouted, running away like a madman. The spider leader did not make things difficult for him and let him disappear into the forest. Damn it! Zidi was both shocked and angry. At the crucial moment, this yellow algae actually escaped with the only cutting weapon. Zhenjin and Zidi tried to save him, but he betrayed them and chose to escape alone. Chapter 19. The flames burned fiercely. In the scorching air, a huge tree slowly fell and hit the ground with a bang. The flying sparks caused even more chaos. The eight-legged spider leader let out a sharp shriek that almost pierced people's eardrums. This was its territory, its home, but now was burned to the ground. Everything in front of it made it very angry. Unlike normal eight-legged spiders, it was not afraid of fire. At the same time, its spider silk had undergone a qualitative change and was not afraid of fire at all. The culprits were right in front of it. It wanted to pour all its anger on these 2 people. Zidi was already trapped in the spider web. Moreover, she only had a black iron aura, so there was nothing to worry about. The only thing to worry about was Zhenjin. This young man's aura, the eight-legged spider leader could not figure out. The leader of the eight-legged spiders focused all his killing intent on Zhenjin. It shot more and more spider silk at Zhenjin. At first, only the spear and the young man's hands were bound by the spider silk. Soon, layers of spider silk wrapped around Zhenjin's entire body, even covering his ears and nose. At this time, if there was a dagger to cut the spider silk, Zhenjin could escape this predicament. But there was none. Huang Zhao had the chance to throw the dagger, but he did not. Therefore, Zhenjin was in a desperate situation. A sharp weapon was the key to escape this predicament. Perhaps if the long sword was in Zhenjin's hands, it would be easy to solve this situation. Even if there was no long sword, a scimitar would do. In short, it was not a spear. Zhenjin suddenly exerted strength in the spiderweb. He had not given up. Although his strength increased, it was far from the limit of the spiderweb. He could not break free. The result of his attempt made Zhenjin feel a little despair. If he could not break free with all his strength, then there was basically no hope. Randomly struggling would only make the spider silk tighter. It was like falling into quicksand. A worthless attempt would only make death come faster. Zhenjin was motionless. His thoughts flashed, trying to find a way to escape. Layers of spider silk wrapped around him. Looking at the young man who seemed to have accepted his fate, the eight-legged spider leader purposely leaned close to the young man's face. At the top of the ferocious mouth part, there were a total of 12 eyeballs, densely packed together. The spider's eyeballs stared at Jinjin. Its mouth parts opened and closed slightly, emitting a squeaking sound. It was as if the spider leader was sneering at Jinjin. It wanted to ravage this young man. It wanted to pierce through him and let his blood run dry. At the same time, it wanted to inject the spider's venom into Jinjin's body. It wanted to watch the venom corrode the young man from the inside out. It wanted to watch the young man slowly rot from the inside out. In the end, it wanted to suck the young man into a puddle. Not a single drop was left, and it was all stuffed into its stomach. This was the consequence of offending it. Jinjin did not struggle. He gritted his teeth and was forced to look at the spider leader. Both sides faced each other. They were only a few steps apart. The spider leader raised its two front legs. The front ends of the legs were as sharp as spears and swords. They easily pierced through the spider web. Immediately, Jinjin let out a muffled groan. He felt two dagger-like tentacles trying to stab into his back. The chainmail came into play and blocked the two legs. This obstruction angered the spider leader even more. It fiercely pulled the spider silk. The distance between Jinjin and it instantly shortened. The distance between their eyes was only the width of a palm. Squeak! The spider leader's mouth part opened wide. A strong rotten stench sprayed onto Jinjin's face. At the same time, a large amount of green viscous liquid, like saliva, flowed out from the mouth part. Jin's eyes widened. He almost thought that the spider leader was going to swallow his head. But in the next moment, the spider leader slightly relaxed its strength. It retracted its mouth part and shook its head at Jinjin. Jinjin actually saw a mocking and cruel smile on the spider's face. He felt a chill in his heart. He immediately understood. The spider in front of him purely wanted to scare him, torture him, and slowly process him so that he could fully enjoy the pain. Listening to his screams and cries, watching him struggle, little by little, towards death. The pressure on the chainmail increased until it finally reached its limit. The chainmail could not withstand it and was pierced through by the spider's sharp legs. The latter successfully pierced Jin's flesh. The youth first felt cold. Then, pain attacked him. In addition to the intense pain, there was also incisive fear. Jinjin could clearly feel the subsequent path of the two legs. After piercing through the outermost layer of flesh, one of the legs continued to penetrate very slowly. It began to endanger the youth's internal organs. The other leg was obstructed and touched his ribs. The spider leader continued to exert force. Jin's ribs were only slightly obstructed before they broke. The pain came. Jinjin could not help but let out a low roar. His handsome face instantly distorted. The flames continued to burn. The light from the flames shone on Jin's face. At this moment, the youth was as sinister as a devil. The spider leader quietly watched, its 10 eyeballs perfectly reflecting the youth's current expression. But what made the spider leader disappointed was that it did not find any cowardly or pleading emotions in Jinjin, only anger and hatred. The flames in Jin's body burned more vigorously than the forest fire around him. Under the torture of the spider leader, he let out continuous low roars. His head felt like it was about to explode, and a whole new set of memories suddenly emerged. The arena was surrounded by people. The duel in the arena was also coming to an end. As expected of a great noble of the South, a youth was forced into a corner. He had injuries on his body. Some of the wounds were so deep that his bones could be seen. He was the temple knight, Qin Kuei. His opponent was a middle-aged man with a thin and long beard. He was unscathed. He slightly raised his head, leisurely and calmly walked to Qin Kuei. Jinjin found himself in the crowd, nervously watching the two people in the arena. His eyes were mainly focused on the middle-aged man, because this man was his father, the patriarch of the Hundred Needles family. Besides Jinjin, there were many colleagues of the Temple Knights. They were all familiar faces. Qin Kuei, if you can't win, just admit defeat. Your opponent is too strong. You're still too young. It's not shameful to lose. You still have a sister. Qin Kuei, don't be stubborn. The young Templars were all shouting. Qin Kuei's sister was also outside the arena. At this moment, her face was pale, without a trace of blood. Her delicate body trembled, like a pitiful flower. Qin Kuei took a deep breath, stood up shakily, and used all his strength to lift the long sword in his hand. Once again, he faced the patriarch of the Hundred Needles family. Alas! A heavy sigh came from the crowd. This duel was initiated by Qin Kuei. It's harder to make a guy like him admit defeat than to pull a dragon back. What should we do? Even if Qin Kuei admits defeat, it depends on whether the patriarch of the Hundred Needles family is willing to let him go. Yes, Qin Kuei's father and grandfather died in that battle. They were all killed by the Hundred Needles family. The hatred between the two families is too deep. Qin Kuei shouted and launched a useless charge again. The patriarch of the Hundred Needles family dodged easily. With a gentle twist of his sword in his hand, the long sword in Qin Kuei's hand was blown away. Clang! The long sword flew into the air and immediately fell to the ground. The tip of the sword cut into the marble and stabbed into Qin Kuei's back. The contrast between the strong and the weak was very obvious. Qin Kuei's sister couldn't bear it anymore. She pleaded with the old knight who was presiding over the duel. "Uncle Commander, please, for the sake of our many years of friendship, save my brother." The old knight was the commander of the 5th Regiment of Temple Knights. He snorted and looked unhappy. This is a sacred duel between knights. It's fair and impartial. There's no partiality. He looked at Qin Kuei's sister with sharp eyes. "I've already tried to save your brother, but as a member of the 5th Regiment, he didn't even listen to me. He insisted on challenging the patriarch of the Hundred Needles family." How old is he? How much strength does he have? How much combat experience does he have? He hasn't even completely mastered the signature fighting skill of the Qin Kuei family, the bronze equipment. How dare he challenge the patriarch of the Hundred Needles family? Is this the bravery and fearlessness of a knight? He's blinded by the idea of revenge. How stupid. So you've seen it. The patriarch of the Hundred Needles family used the fighting skill, 1,000 Needles, to completely destroy your brother's bronze equipment. 1,000 Needles is the advanced fighting skill of the Hundred Needles family, the signature fighting skill of the Hundred Needles family. It's a move that can only be used by gold warriors. In the past, hundreds of Imperial Knights had died to this move, if not thousands. Even I was killed by this move. My heart was pierced by the sword of the Hundred Needles family. Your brother, Qin Kuei, didn't abide by the creed of the Knights Templar. He gave up bravery and violated patience. He brought about his own destruction. As the patriarch of the Qin Kuei family, he must bear the consequences of his recklessness. This is the price he should pay, even if the price is his life. The ruthless words of the old commander made Qin Kuei's sister completely powerless. She immediately sat on the ground and covered her face to cry. The angry young knights around also became silent because of the old commander's reprimand. But they clenched their teeth and clenched their fists more tightly. The patriarch of the Hundred Needles family took a deep look at the old commander and approached Qin Kuei again. He said in an arrogant tone, "Patriarch Qin Kuei, what other ability do you want to resist? Do you still have any fighting spirit? Then, I'll kill you in the next move." The patriarch of the Hundred Needles family slowly raised the sword vertically, almost touching the tip of his nose. This will be the last scene of your life. So, keep your eyes open and watch carefully. Don't worry, it's too flattering to use 1,000 needles to kill you. You're far inferior to your father and grandfather. 100 Needles Wind is the most suitable burial for you. If you're lucky enough to survive this move, I'll spare your life. What's wrong with that? After that, the sword in the hands of the patriarch of the Hundred Needles family suddenly turned into a dazzling sword shadow. Qin Kuei roared. He had been waiting for this moment. The remaining fighting spirit in his body was urged out. In the flickering blue light, it vaguely formed a knight's spear. Boom! The two sides collided and then passed each other. An arm was thrown away in the air. After spilling blood, it fell out of the field. This arm also held a sword in its hand. It was the hand of the patriarch of the Hundred Needles family. The whole audience was shocked. There was dead silence. With a flop, Qin Kuei fainted on the ground, motionless. The patriarch of the Hundred Needles family covered the wound on his shoulder with his left hand. His face was extremely ugly. "Father, father!" Zhen Jin exclaimed in a trembling voice. At this time, the old commander walked into the field and stood between the patriarch of the Hundred Needles family and Qin Kuei, separating them. He frowned deeply and stared at the middle-aged nobleman with a very serious expression. "Patriarch of the Hundred Needles family, the words spoken in the duel are sacred oaths. The duel between you is over." The middle-aged man's pupils shrank slightly. He stared at the unconscious Qin Kuei and gritted his teeth. His face was full of anger and hatred, even though his wound was bleeding. After a while, he nodded slowly and staggered down the field with strong gloominess and unwillingness. "Father!" Zhen Jin ran over and supported the patriarch of the Hundred Needles family. There was a burst of cheers. Qin Kuei's sister wept with joy. The young temple knights raised their arms and cheered. Many passers-by exclaimed in disbelief. The middle-aged man looked around and took in the surrounding scene. His expression had calmed down. "My son, raise your head and look at me. Tell me what the family motto of our family is. Don't overestimate or underestimate people." Zhen Jin raised his head reluctantly and said in a choked voice, "Very good. Remember it. Remember it firmly." The patriarch of the Hundred Needles family gnashed his teeth and said fiercely. Chapter 20. The memories dissipated, but anger still filled Zhen Jin's chest. Zhen Jin felt as though he was about to explode from all these emotions. "Ah!" He let out a terrifying roar. "I can't die. How could he fall here? I still want to protect my fiancée. I want to leave this place alive and take control of White Sand City. Finally, I want to revitalize my Hundred Needles clan. My Knight's Road. How can my Knight's Road be stranded here?" The young man roared in his heart. At this moment, the blood in his body seemed to be boiling. The blood flowed rapidly like a surging river. Then, it turned into a waterfall and poured into the young man's hands. Something strange happened at this moment. The young man's hands rapidly expanded, becoming thick and large. His 10 fingers continued to elongate, and his fingernails turned pitch black, turning into sharp claws as hard as iron. Their claws were incomparably sharp, like 10 daggers. Zhen Jin tried to use his sharp claws. With just a little bit of force, the spider web was easily torn apart. His sharp claws were now red and hot, like iron that had been burned for a long time. Zhen Jin didn't think at all. Relying purely on instinct, he stabbed his claws at the spider leader. The 8-legged spider was already very close to Zhen Jin. Their faces were only a palm's distance apart. When Zhen Jin's hands mutated, they were blocked by the spider's silk again. When Zhen Jin's sharp claws came, the 8-legged spider leader was completely caught off guard and couldn't dodge. Pucci! The 12-inch-long red claws pierced deeply into the spider leader's body. Zhen Jin roared and continued to exert force. His entire palm was almost submerged in the wound. The spider leader was attacked. It was as if it had been struck by lightning. Its body was as stiff as a rock. After a breath's time, a large amount of spider blood and milky white brain matter flowed out from the wound. The silver-ranked 8-legged spider died on the spot. With their leader dead, the remaining 8-legged spiders quickly fled. The boy and girl were immediately saved. Zhen Jin was in a daze as he slowly withdrew his hands from the spider leader's roasted body. More accurately, it was a pair of claws. Unbelievable. His hand had completely transformed into the hand of a giant gorilla. His entire hand had expanded several times, and a lot of thick black hair had grown on it, making his forearm look very small. Sharp claws extended from the front of his 10 fingers. They were sharp, hard, and emitted a high temperature, like iron rods that had just been taken out from a furnace. What is going on? While Zhen Jin was still in shock, another change occurred. First, the red iron claws rapidly cooled down, and then turned into ashes, quickly collapsing and dispersing. Then, his hands quickly shrunk and returned to their original human form. The black fur of the bear also fell off, revealing the fair skin of a human. Zhen Jin's body suddenly shook violently. Weakness, an indescribable feeling of weakness, reached the bottom of his heart. This wasn't just a lack of physical strength, nor was it a mental exhaustion. It felt as if a part of his body had been emptied. The surrounding flames were still burning, and the bushes were crackling. Without the support of its claws, the eight-legged spider could only lie on the ground like a corpse. Everything was like a dream. "Sir, Lord Jinjin." Zidi's voice seemed to come from the horizon, and it became clearer and louder. Under the urging of this voice, Zhen Jin finally reacted. "Hiss!" The youth immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. Two of the eight-legged spider's tentacles were still stuck in his back. Clenching his teeth, he pulled out the tentacles, which immediately drew blood. After taking out medicine and randomly sprinkling it on the wound, Zhen Jin immediately rushed to Zidi's side. He didn't have a dagger, but the spider's tentacles were sharper. Using the tentacles, Zhen Jin cut open the spider web and rescued Zidi. "Sir, you've awakened your fighting spirit?" Zidi asked in surprise. Zhen Jin's head moved. Zidi was lying on the ground just now, and my back was facing her. She didn't see the changes in my hands. "No, I used the tip of the spear to pierce through the spider web." Zhen Jin didn't think much about it, and subconsciously hid the secret. The changes just now were extremely abnormal, and it seemed that the youth subconsciously didn't want to say it out loud, so as not to worry his fiancée. "That hateful yellow algae ran away. We must find him and teach him a lesson," Zidi said fiercely. If the yellow algae hadn't run away, the youth and the girl wouldn't have fallen into such a dangerous situation. Zhen Jin nodded and was about to speak when there was a loud bang. It turned out that a large tree bathed in flames had fallen to the ground. Sparks flew everywhere, and the fire grew bigger. "Let's get out of here." Zidi wanted to bandage Zhen Jin's wound, but she was stopped by Zhen Jin. Although the wound was deep, it had already stopped bleeding. With his current vitality, escaping from the fire was the most urgent thing. "Wait, this is good stuff. You can't lose it." Zidi pointed her finger at the corpse of the eight-legged spider leader. Her eyes were shining brighter than the flames. Thus, the youth and the girl dragged the eight-legged spider and quickly escaped from the fire. Just as they reached a safe distance, the two of them heard a dull, buzzing sound. Then an uncountable number of poisonous fire bees flew into the sea of fire. The scale was so large that it covered the sky. The number of poisonous fire bees was too large, and the fire that spread for miles was quickly contained and then slowly extinguished. Zhen Jin and Zidi were suffering from the fire poison. Seeing this scene, they didn't dare to stay in the vicinity. They ran for miles before stopping to rest. Fortunately, they found an ideal habitat at the bottom of a cliff. For the next 3 days, Zhen Jin and Zidi rested here. Using the remaining body fluids of the eight-legged spider, Zidi created an aura potion that disguised the aura of a silver-ranked magical beast. This greatly increased the safety of the habitat. Zhen Jin's miraculous life force was once again displayed. The wound on his back healed at an astonishing speed. With the help of Zidi's potion, the wound was already covered with new flesh. Zhen Jin was worried that the eight-legged spider's tentacles contained corrosive poison, but it didn't exist. Zidi took advantage of this time to dismember the eight-legged spider. Although the conditions were very simple, she still tried her best to collect useful parts. Using these materials, she created a few bottles of corrosive potions and strong adhesion potions. These were all very basic potions, but because the materials used were more high-end, their effects were worth looking forward to. Zidi was very regretful about this. For the past 3 days, she would nag from time to time, "If the conditions were better, I could definitely create an agility potion. It's a pity that these materials can only be used to create these little things." Jin Jun comforted her with a smile, acknowledging the value of these little things in her mouth. Zidi used the monkey tail bear and the cave's ores to create the flame retardant potions and flame retardant potions. They were all very useful. Chapter 21. The sky was blue, and the branches above their heads crisscrossed. As they continued forward, Jean and ZD felt that the temperature of the air was rapidly dropping. In a place with a wide field of vision, Jean looked into the distance and found a snow-white trail. That's a snowy mountain. Damn it, there's a snowy mountain on this island. According to the route of the Pig Kiss, this island was obviously in the tropics. A rainforest was the most normal landform, but there were not only forests, but also snowy mountains. According to the description of the yellow algae, there was also a desert. Sir, look, there are traces of the yellow algae here. ZD made a new discovery. Jean nodded after checking and confirmed. We're about to find him. Other than him, we might be able to find the other members of the exploration team. They had already adjusted the direction of their journey, because along the way, they not only found the tracks of the yellow algae, but also the marks left by the exploration team. In front of the pine trees blocking the way, Jean raised the long-handled scythe in his hand and cut off the long threads hanging from the branches that almost reached the ground. He continued to walk. This long-handled scythe was made from a curved spider's tentacle. Other than that, Jean, with the help of ZD, also made a few spider spears and a spider longsword. These newly made weapons were very sharp. Along the way, they brought great convenience to Jean and ZD. The battle with the spider allowed Jean's weapons and equipment to be greatly improved. The quality of the steel longsword was far inferior to the spider longsword. If it was in the past, Jean would be very happy, but now he did not care too much. These days, he had been thinking about the strange change that happened not long ago. His hands suddenly changed into the sharp claws of a monkey-tail brown bear, and after stabbing the 8-legged spider, he even caused the silver-level beast to burn from the inside out, killing it in one blow. After that, he did not tell the truth to ZD, and his excuses were actually quite clumsy. But ZD did not pursue the matter. This fiancé's understanding made Jean feel deeply moved in her heart. But what was going on? The first thing that came to Jean's mind was the transformation spell. Drool could turn into a wolf, bear, or even a wyvern. Mages could turn into a sheep, and thieves could use camouflage. Could it be that I'm not just a holy knight? Do I have other part-time jobs? This guess was immediately dispelled by Jean. No matter what kind of spell it was, there had to be a casting process. But at that time, the changes in his hands were very natural. There was no subconscious casting at all. Don't forget, the entire island forbade the use of low-level magic and chi. So, it's a bloodline awakening. Nobles possessed extraordinary bloodlines, and these bloodlines were often accompanied by obvious characteristics. For example, the Shengming Emperor's bloodline was the bloodline of the Templar. Including the Shengming Emperor, the direct descendants of the family all had silver-white pupils and snow-white wings. Half-elves with elven and human bloodlines also had pointed ears. Human nobles with demon or devil bloodlines usually had horns on their heads. But why did my hands become like a monkey-tail brown bear's? Could it be that Jean had awakened the bloodline of the brown bear? Not to mention the existence of such a bloodline. Wasn't it too much of a coincidence? So, the biggest possibility is that ZD concocted a potion at the last minute to save me. Jean guessed that the potion produced during that irreplicable rescue was most likely a transformation potion, because at that time, ZD had infused a large amount of the monkey-tail brown bear's blood into Jean's body, and the blood was the main ingredient of a certain transformation potion. When Jean was saved, the transformation potion's effect was hidden in his body. It was only when Jean was facing the 8-legged spider that the potion's effect erupted. Jean felt that this was the most likely possibility, so there were even more guesses. Is a transformation potion's effect still there? Can it erupt a second time? If it erupts again, how long can it last? Jean hoped that he could erupt again, and that this kind of change could still occur. Because this was a trump card. This trump card was very powerful, and Jean relied on it to directly kill a silver-level beast. Although there were various advantageous factors, the terrifying attack power of the claws could not be denied. As for the possible erosion of strength bloodline contamination, and other problems after taking this transformation potion, Jin could only temporarily put it aside. Now he couldn't care less about these things. Everything should be to ensure survival. These hidden dangers could be completely purified in the future by the priests of the Holy Cathedral. The wind started to blow. The trees rustled, and the forest stirred up a mix of dark, thick, and light green pine waves. The wind seemed to be blowing from the snow mountain, causing the air temperature to drop rapidly. This did not cause any trouble for Jin and ZD. Although their clothes were thin, they carried many pieces of hot ore. They followed the traces all the way. A gurgling mountain spring appeared in front of their eyes. This should be underground water, Jin guessed after observing. The spring water here is very clear and cold. He was not in a hurry to drink, even though their water storage had already dropped to the alert level. Water sources in the wild were not so safe. Drinking water rashly was likely to cost their lives. There are a lot of animal tracks here. There shouldn't be a problem. ZD pointed at the soil around the spring, and suddenly her expression changed slightly. Wait, Lord Jin, look over here. On the other side of the mountain spring, they saw a lot of human footprints. These footprints surrounded the mountain spring, and it was obvious that many people had squatted here to collect the underground spring water here. Very good. Some of the footprints are still very new. It seems that we are very close to the exploration team. But now, let's fill up the empty water bag first, Jin said. They began to collect water. Fortunately, they found the water bag. Otherwise, without a container to store water, it would be very inconvenient to explore in the wild. ZD squatted on the ground, stretched out her arms, opened the small mouth of the water bag to the maximum, and lowered her head to fill the water. Jin's posture was very particular. He did not lower his head to fill the water, but had to keep his head up, glancing from time to time, while filling the water and scouting the surroundings. In the wild, there were many ferocious beasts that specialized in using water sources to wait for prey. Once the prey lost their vigilance because of drinking water, these ferocious beasts would pounce on their targets like lightning and hunt them down. The human army also had similar training content. When drinking water, one had to raise his head at all times to prevent a sneak attack by the enemy. Therefore, when the enemy appeared, Jin was the first to notice and loudly reminded ZD. The two of them quickly stood up. 1, 2, 3. Some revealed themselves in the forest, some stood up from high mountain rocks, and some were faintly discernible in the grass. Soon, the boy and girl found that they were surrounded. Most of these people were wearing sailor clothes, and their faces were tanned from the sun and wind. Every one of them had a weapon, mainly a scimitar, but there were also swords, spears, and even bows and crossbows. A bronze-ranked elite came out from the crowd and walked in front of Jin and ZD. Seeing this person, Jin's eyes flashed. ZD's expression changed slightly, and she said unhappily, "It's you. Humph, we finally caught you, Huang Zhao." Chapter 22. A few days ago. Who is it? The sailor in charge of guarding suddenly shouted, nervously clenching the spear in his hand. A suspicious humanoid shadow came out of the bushes. After glancing at the sailor, it fell to the ground and fainted. The sailor was stunned. He carefully came to the side of the unconscious, mysterious man, pressed the spear against his shoulder, and turned his face up to the sky. Although the face was dark and had terrible burns, the sailor frowned for a while and still recognized the identity of the mysterious man. It's Huang Zhao. Huang Zhao is still alive. Captain Lan Zhao, your brother is still alive. He's back, the sailor shouted, alarming the exploration team members in the camp. A group of people flocked over. Lan Zhao, who was the leader, had a strong body. He had a strong bronze aura. Seeing the unconscious Huang Zhao, Lan Zhao couldn't believe it at first, but then he was pleasantly surprised. He quickly squatted down, lifted Huang Zhao's head, and let him lie down. Brother, wake up, Lan Zhao shouted. Although Huang Zhao was unconscious, he was still murmuring, water, water. Lon Zao stretched out his hand, and the other sailors immediately handed him water bags. After being nourished by the water, Huang Zao finally woke up slowly. His blurry vision gradually became clear. Seeing Lon Zao's rough face, Huang Zao almost cried, "Brother, I'm Huang Zao. I'm back. I'm still alive." Huang Zao's voice was very hoarse and weak. He chased after the team alone. It was not easy in this dangerous forest. "Huang Zao, what's going on? We all thought you were dead. Captain Lon Zao wanted to go back to find you several times, but he was stopped by everyone. No one thought you were alive. Lon Zao wiped tears for you several times." An old man squeezed into the crowd. His face was full of wrinkles, his body was thin, and he wore a pair of cracked glasses. He had a large white beard. Because he had not cleaned himself for a long time, his white beard had turned black and gray, like a rag that had been used for a long time. This old man was Tsang Su. He was an old scholar who had served the nobles for many years. Everyone in the exploration team respected him. It was because of his guidance that the exploration team walked out of the desert. "Thank the gods, thank fate, you're still here, you're still alive. Oh my God, this is a miracle!" Cyanobacteria shouted. "Quick, tell your brother. What happened to you?" Lon Zao was also very curious. Xian Zao snorted coldly. "I didn't die at all. It's just that he was temporarily unconscious at that time." He briefly recounted the development and outcome of the matter. Lon Zao was deeply moved. "Huang Zao, you really did manage to keep your life. That was really thrilling." The people around him chimed in one after another, exclaiming or congratulating him. The old scholar Tsang Su's expression became serious. "Everyone, it seems that we're in trouble." "What kind of trouble?" someone asked. "No matter how troublesome it is, I won't abandon my brother. We'll fight the spiders to the death." Lon Zao's eyes flashed with killing intent. His attitude was very resolute. Xian Zao said, "There are no spiders following me. Everyone, don't worry. As long as we escape from their hunting grounds, those spiders will climb back into the canopy." I stayed with them for a few days. Moreover, that fire at the end probably burned all the spiders to death. Xian Zao's tone was full of pride. The danger was over. His escape this time had turned into something he could brag about. The old scholar shook his head. "I'm not talking about the spiders. I'm talking about those two people. Those two people died long ago, although it's a pity," Xian Zao said. He did not directly tell them about his escape. Instead, he said that the eight-legged spiders had attacked Jinjin and the others. He was lucky and took the opportunity to escape after being spared. "They might not be dead." The old scholar sighed. Cyanobacteria muttered, "This island forbids low-level magic and do chi. How can those two young people escape the wrath of the eight-legged spider?" The old scholar was still frowning. "The strength of an iron rank is indeed restricted on this island. But what about silver level? Gold level? We don't have such a strong person among us, so we can't be sure if such strength is also restricted." Xian Zao couldn't help but widen his eyes. "Mr. Tsang Su, do you think that those two are silver level or even gold level? That's impossible. They're too young. Moreover, I didn't feel any silver or gold level aura from them. But that girl seems to be a black iron level magician." The old scholar laughed and shook his head slightly. "There are many young magicians. The White Wolf General of Cold Iron City is only 17 years old. The great magician of the Golden Rose family, Sable, is only 16 years old. The assassin Luo Shi who rose recently was discovered by the Assassin Alliance from the civilians. It is said that he is only 18 years old. It can't be. These people are all big shots in the future. They're too far away from us. Don't tell me that I've met such a person so casually." The old scholar's voice was very low. "The possibility is very high. According to your description, that girl is young and has black iron level strength. She can't be ignored. Then what kind of power did she have? That girl called the young man sir. Then what is this young man's status and strength? You can think about it." Everyone fell into deep thought. The two brothers, Xian Zao and Lon Zao, started to look bad. The old scholar waited for a moment and continued, "I think that the young man not only has a high status, but he is also very strong. It is unlikely that he is a gold level, but it is very likely that he is a silver level magician. Mr. Tsang Su, do you have any evidence? Lan Zhao asked, why do you think so? Tsang Su smiled. Let's think about it from another angle. Let's say that you found someone who is asking for help. To save this person, you would have to face more than 10 bronze level 8-legged spiders. Including you, there are only 2 people in total. If you're not a silver or gold level magician, how would you dare to provoke these spiders and take the risk to save them? Lonzo opened his mouth wide and was speechless for a moment. So, these 2 people are most likely not dead. I offended a silver level magician, or even a gold level magician. Xian Zhao muttered to himself, the corner of his mouth twitching. I shouldn't have run away. I should have returned the dagger to them. I was wrong. I made a big mistake. Xian Zhao grabbed Lan Zhao's arm tightly and shouted. Under great psychological pressure, he finally chose to confess. When everyone heard that he ran away and took the crucial dagger, their faces changed. Mr. Tsang Su, what should we do? Lan Zhao was also out of ideas. He could only look at the old scholar for help. Everyone, don't panic. Tsang Su raised his hand and calmed everyone down. Things haven't reached the point of no return yet. Everything that happened before was just my guess. The 2 of them might have become food for the spiders or died in the sea of fire. Isn't that right? But didn't you just say that the 2 of them might have already dealt with the problem and are chasing after us? We have left marks all along the way. Lan Zhao's face was very conflicted. Tsang Su nodded and stared at Lan Zhao. His eyes were deep. So, we have to turn around and go back. We have to confirm whether the 2 of them are alive or dead. If they are dead, we might be able to pick up some excellent equipment. If they're still alive, they are in some kind of trouble. We have to help them and repay them for saving Xian Zhao's life. We have to atone for Xian Zhao's escape. If they're chasing after us, I strongly suggest that unless it is absolutely necessary, we should not resist. Think about it carefully. Do you think we can fight against someone who can deal with the 8-legged spiders? Surrender. Surrendering is a very good option. Don't forget, we were once on the same boat. We have all been reduced to this place. They need us. The big shots need subordinates. At the very least, they need enough people to control the boat. Scholar Tsang Su's words made everyone nod. Then what should I do? Xian Zhao asked anxiously. Don't worry, I am here, little brother. Although Lan Zhao said this, his tone was obviously lacking in confidence. Tsang Su looked at Xian Zhao sincerely. Fighting head-on will only lead to your own death. Even if you keep running away, where can you run to? Run to the forest and be eaten by the wild beasts? Follow my plan. This is your best chance of survival. Remember, if the 2 big shots are still alive, you must do your best to show them the value of your survival. Don't be stingy with your belongings. Even if the big shots don't want them, you must still contribute. You must fully express your remorse. Xian Zhao nodded continuously, doing his best to remember Tsang Su's words in his heart. Just like this, the group turned around and went back the way they came. At the mountain spring, they encountered Junjin and ZD. They took the initiative to show themselves. Xian Zhao walked out of the crowd and stood in front of the young boy and girl. It's you. We finally caught you, Xian Zhao. ZD was displeased. Junjin remained silent, his gaze unfriendly. Xian Zhao's heart was trembling. How he hoped that Junjin and ZD would die like this. But now, the 2 of them were standing in front of him, perfectly fine. Even if Xian Zhao was a rough man with a muddle-headed nature, the old scholar Tsang Su had already explained the meaning of his words clearly. Then, Xian Zhao saw the new weapons that Junjin was equipped with. These spears, scythes, and swords were obviously assembled with the forelimbs of spiders and wood. They killed the silver-ranked spider leader. Why am I so unlucky to encounter 2 big shots? Clang! Xian Zhao threw the scimitar in his hand on the mountain rock. Then, with a plop, Xian Zhao knelt on the ground, his forehead hitting the ground hard as he begged for mercy. Sirs, I am Xian Zhao. I was the one who ran away. I was wrong. I committed an unforgivable crime. This lowly one will not resist. If you want to kill me or torture me, it's all up to you, sirs." The young boy and girl looked at each other, somewhat confused. What was going on? After they were surrounded, they thought that these people were going to harm them. In the end, Xianzhao directly admitted his guilt and surrendered. "Sirs, this old man's name is Tsang Su. I am a scholar who once served the Sand Tower family for 38 years. The old scholar walked over at this time. Behind him was a brawny man, Lan Zhao. Zhen Jin did not speak, but ZD took half a step forward and took the initiative to speak. "I am ZD, the current president of the Wisteria Chamber of Commerce. Now, I am honored to introduce you all. The person in front of you is a noble bloodline holder. His bloodline can be traced back to the legendary magical beast, the golden stinger queen bee. He is the only heir of the 100 Needles family, a holy knight, and a candidate for the White Sand City's mayor this time. Wisteria Chamber of Commerce." When ZD just opened her mouth, someone could not help but exclaim in a low voice, "This famous Chamber of Commerce, these people had more or less heard of it." Holy Knight? When ZD said this, it caused another round of exclamations. Lan Zhao's body shook. Xianzhao kneeled on the ground, not daring to raise his head. His ears began to buzz. 100 Needles family. The old scholar Tsang Su's pupil shrank. He knew more about the nobles than Lan Zhao, Xianzhao, and the others. Tsang Su knew that the 100 Needles family was not simple. Although this family suffered heavy losses because of the war against the Empire, they were still a great noble family in the south. The current leader of the 100 Needles family was a gold-ranked powerhouse. Although he suffered heavy losses, he still could not be underestimated. And the young man in front of him was the only heir of this family? Tsang Su's face showed a respectful expression. He bowed and said in a deep voice, "Tsang Su is honored to be here to greet the two sirs." Lan Zhao kneeled on the ground. Lan Zhao greets the two sirs. "Sirs, Xianzhao is my younger brother. I am willing to use my own life as the price to beg the two of you to forgive his sins." "Brother." Xianzhao raised his head, straightened his upper body, and looked at Lan Zhao in shock. His forehead was already covered in blood. Zhen Jin was expressionless and silent. His actions brought more and more pressure to the others. "Sirs," the old scholar spoke again, "please allow me, an outsider, to be honest with you." "Speak." Zhen Jin finally spoke his first sentence. Tsang Su exhaled and continued. Xianzhao committed an unforgivable sin. He tried his best to rush back to his brother's side. He was frightened and panicked. He was so weak that he fainted. This reckless and cowardly young man was indeed fleeing in the face of death. But after he settled down, he was even more tormented by his guilt. He fell into deep remorse and self-blame. He did not hide anything and told us the truth. He also begged for everyone's help to rush back to the spider forest to rescue the two sirs. It is because of this that we are fortunate enough to meet the two sirs here. Sirs, please consider Xianzhao's repentant heart and punish him lightly." Xianzhao and Lan Zhao looked at Tsang Su with gratitude. ZD looked at the two brothers kneeling on the ground and could not help but sneer. This lowly and cowardly person deceived the Lord Jinjin and concealed the existence of silver magical beasts for his own selfish reasons. Then he fled at the last moment and put the noble bloodline in danger. He repaid kindness with enmity. "Scholar, are you advising us to be lenient with people like this?" Tsang Su nodded and smiled. "This is the first time I have met the two sirs. It is indeed too offensive for this old man to say these words. But in fact, the two of them are not soldiers of the Empire. They are only sailors on the Pig's Kiss. They can't be considered deserters, right? Sigh, these two brothers are actually pitiful people. They were born as fishermen and lost their parents at a very young age. The two brothers can only rely on each other. If sirs want to execute the younger brother, then I am afraid the older brother will not live alone. Lord Jinjin, you are a holy knight, a knight among knights. You were born noble and have a bright future like the clouds. But these two brothers are only ants in the mud." Lord Jinjin, You will definitely be the future lord of White Sand City. At that time, your brilliance will shine over the entire city, and your kindness will nourish all the citizens. Why are you so stingy with these two little ants? If your excellency forgives these two pitiful and pathetic little ants, I believe that they will repent for the rest of their lives and remember your excellency's compassion and benevolence. They will do their best to repay your excellency's kindness. ZD raised her eyebrows and looked deeply at Song Su, but did not speak. Song Su used his foot to lightly kick Lan Zhao, who was kneeling on the ground. Lan Zhao shuddered and hurriedly said in a loud voice, "Sir, please be merciful and give us brothers a chance to confess our sins and repent for saving our lives. Please be magnanimous and reluctantly accept us as lowly servants. From now on, we will follow Sir's orders." Huang Zhao did not speak and just kept kowtowing. The two brothers' begging attitude moved the others. "Sirs," ZD looked at Jinjin, waiting for him to make a decision. Everyone looked at Jinjin. The old scholar Song Su lowered his head and looked at the ground. Seeing the two brothers' blood-stained faces, Jinjin expressionlessly said, "Saving the dying and helping the injured, supporting the weak, this is the creed of the Temple Knights. It is because of this that I saved you in the Spider Forest. Do not overestimate people, but also do not underestimate them. This is the family motto of my Hundred Needles clan. Therefore, Huang Zhao, Lan Zhao, I am willing to give you two a chance. I hope you can use your loyalty and practical actions to change my view of you." "Thank you. Thank you, sirs." Huang Zhao and Lan Zhao were overjoyed. The surrounding people let out a sigh of relief. When they looked at Huang Zhao and Lan Zhao again, many people couldn't help but reveal looks of envy. Although these two brothers sold themselves as slaves and lost their freedom, by relying on a big shot like Jinjin, they might have a meteoric rise in the future. Song Su bowed again and said, "Lord Jinjin, your magnanimity is like the earth, your kindness comparable to the sun. I praise you. You will be our flag. Under your leadership, we lowly people will be able to move forward." Jinjin looked at the people around him. His body was as straight as a spear, and his calm voice was clearly transmitted to everyone's ears. The temple's radiance shrouds every inch of land. The Empire's military flag protects every citizen of the Empire. Follow me. I will lead you out of here alive. "Yes, sirs." Everyone responded in unison and half knelt on the ground. Chapter 23. Jinjin and ZD had already discussed the plan to recruit more subordinates. That was why ZD had urged Jinjin to save Huang Zhao. However, Huang Zhao had concealed the existence of the silver magical beast, and, at the same time fled, causing accidents to happen again and again. But now, it seemed that the final result was even better. Huang Zhao and Lan Zhao had become Jinjin slaves. Originally, it was just to recruit them, and they still had freedom. But now that they had become slaves, they had lost their freedom. The brothers were both bronze level, and slaves with this kind of strength were quite valuable. Of course, Jinjin did not have any reliable means of binding them, such as a slave contract or something. In this kind of environment, Needle Gold can't ask for so much. Huang Zhao and Lan Zhao had relied on Jinjin as slaves, and with their own influence, the others naturally chose to rely on Jinjin. Thus, Jinjin smoothly obtained the actual control of this exploration team. The brothers Huang Zhao and Lan Zhao were both bronze-level elites. Huang Zhao was good at using a halberd, and Lan Zhao was good at using a scimitar. These two were the strongest. Among the rest, there were 2 archers and 1 crossbowman. There were 13 people left, including axemen, gunmen, and shield-bearers. Including the unarmed old scholar Song Su, there were 19 people in total, not counting Jinjin and ZD. According to Song Su, when they first set off, the entire exploration team had nearly 40 people, and the team was very large. But by now, the exploration team had been reduced by half. These people's defensive equipment was very poor. The brothers Huang Zhao and Lan Zhao were wearing leather armor, and the others were wearing linen clothes. There was no shortage of survival resources, and the team had brought enough food and fresh water. This information was obtained by Zhen Jin from Tsang-Su. Since this mountain spring is drinkable, then please assign some people to collect more fresh water for us. We can give up half of the kerosene. Zhen Jin gave the first order. Yes, sir. Tsang-Su accepted the order and respectfully left the tent. This tent was brought by the exploration team, and it was built by the brothers Huang Zhou and Lan Zhao. Zhen Jin could have a good afternoon nap here. As soon as Tsang-Su left the tent, ZD opened the curtain and walked in. "My lord, this old scholar of ours is not simple," ZD said. When Zhen Jin summoned Tsang-Su alone, he had a preliminary meeting with each member. From the mouths of the others, ZD roughly figured out the whole truth. So it was Tsang-Su's analysis that made Huang Zhao and Lan Zhao realize that they are in big trouble. Zhen Jin listened to ZD's report and smiled. It seems that the spoils we collected from the eight-legged spider have also shocked these people. You can't overestimate people, but you can't underestimate them either. Zhen Jin sighed from the bottom of his heart. The result of this matter was very good, but the whole process made Zhen Jin constantly reflect on himself. He overestimated Huang Zhao's nature and did not realize the possibility of him hiding information. He wishfully thought that Huang Zhao would be used by him for saving his life. But the result was that Huang Zhao fled at the last moment, abandoning his two saviors, Zhen Jin and ZD. Later, Huang Zhao and Lan Zhao, under great pressure, sought refuge with him and sold themselves as slaves. Was it because the two of them were sincerely repenting? Maybe a little, but it should be more due to Zhen Jin and ZD's powerful strength and deep background. What about the others? They were happy to be led by Zhen Jin. Why? Zhen Jin was strong. In such a dangerous environment, the weak relying on the strong was one of the best survival strategies, wasn't it? And Zhen Jin's identity as a holy knight, as well as his deeds of saving Huang Zhao, made people believe that although this leader was young, his moral character was worthy of their trust. Among them, the most eye-catching was the old scholar Tsang-Su. He had served the noble family for more than 30 years, so he had learned the wisdom of the noble's survival in game. He was unarmed and had no combat strength, but he was respected by the entire exploration team. The brothers Huang Zhao and Lan Zhao were almost obedient to Tsang-Su's words. When Tsang-Su received Huang Zhao's information, he immediately became aware of Zhen Jin and ZD's identities. The entire exploration team was led by him, so they immediately went back and finally took the initiative to seek refuge with Zhen Jin. Huang Zhao and Lan Zhao became his meeting gift to Zhen Jin, but even if the brothers sold themselves as slaves, they were still very grateful to Tsang-Su. The words he said to Zhen Jin, on the surface, were good words for the brothers, but in reality, it was a deal. Tsang-Su took the initiative to seek refuge with Zhen Jin, allowing the latter to smoothly accept these subordinates and have two bronze-level slaves. And Zhen Jin also gave him a full return. In the new team, Tsang-Su became the third person after Zhen Jin and ZD. Zhen Jin's first order was to make him the leader and lead a group of people to collect fresh water. This was the youth's response to Tsang-Su taking the initiative to seek refuge. He kept his guard up against Tsang-Su, but at the same time, he admired him. He knew that he needed this kind of talent by his side. Don't look at Tsang-Su as just a scholar. An ordinary farmer could beat him. But he had knowledge and wisdom that ordinary people could not reach. Knowledge and wisdom were also a kind of invisible power. About my incomplete memory and inability to use battle chi, you need to keep it a secret for the time being. Zhen Jin also took care of ZD. ZD nodded repeatedly, her face slightly solemn. I understand, sir. Zhen Jin had just taken control of this exploration team, so there were still hidden dangers. If these subordinates found out that Zhen Jin could not use battle chi, would it cause some bad thoughts? Without the use of battle chi, The difference between the different levels was not that big. Just as the family motto of the Hundred Needles family said, people should not be overestimated nor underestimated. Zhenjin now had a deep understanding of this sentence. Although he had become the leader of the exploration team, his control of the team was still very weak. It was impossible for him to follow orders to the extent of prohibition. Arrange for the members of the exploration team to come in one by one. I will talk to them alone in the tent. Zhenjin finally ordered ZD. So, when Song Su led a few people to collect fresh water and return to the tent to report, he was stopped by Huang Zhou and Lan Zhao, who were guarding outside. Lord Zhenjin is talking to Baiya. Song Su was slightly surprised. He knew that Baiya, this young man with a bright smile, was the son of a hunter and was not eye-catching in the exploration team. Did Baiya do something wrong? Song Su asked. No, the entire exploration team has to go into the tent alone and be questioned by Lord Zhenjin. Lan Zhao replied. Song Su could not help but be interested. What does Lord Zhenjin ask them? Huang Zhao shrugged. Nothing more than some personal background, family situation, personal strengths, and information about shipwrecks and islands. At this moment, the tent curtain opened, and Baiya, a member of the exploration team, walked out with an excited expression. Ah, it's Mr. Scholar. Baiya greeted him first. Looking at you, the Lord Zhenjin has a special impression of you, right? Song Su smiled and nodded. Baiya grinned. Of course not. In fact, the Lord Zhenjin has promised everyone that as long as they perform well, they may be able to follow him and join Baisha City in the future. At the very least, they can become guards of Baisha City. Isn't that what you wanted? You have to perform well. Song Su patted Baiya on the shoulder. Baiya nodded repeatedly and said energetically, I will definitely work hard. After receiving Lan Zhao's report, Song Su entered the tent again to see Zhenjin. Lord, according to your instructions, we abandoned half of the kerosene and used the original oil bags to store fresh water. Song Su respectfully reported. Well done. You can go and rest first. After lunch, there will be a meeting to discuss the next itinerary. Prepare yourself. Yes, Lord. Song Su bowed and left the tent. He did not go far, but stood beside the tent and watched for a while. The few members who had followed him to store fresh water were also summoned by Zhenjin one by one. Everyone did not stay in the tent for long, but when they came out, the expressions on their faces were obviously different from before they went in. Even the eyes of the people who usually did not smile seemed to be smeared with a layer of oil. Song Su took a deep look at the tent, smiled, and whispered to himself, This is also good. Not all strong people had the ability to lead. In Song Su's opinion, Zhenjin was very young. It was rare for such a young man to have at least a silver-level cultivation. Most of his time was probably spent on his own cultivation. This involved energy, so his learning and mastery in other aspects were naturally weak. But now it seemed that Zhenjin was at least qualified to be a leader. This young man was not yet the lord of Baisha City, but he could make promises out of thin air and outline a beautiful future for these members of the exploration team to follow him. The people's hearts were gradually won over by Zhenjin, and the morale of the team was also rising. Zhenjin's control over the entire exploration team was rapidly deepening. Chapter 24. The meeting in the afternoon was held in the tent. There were a total of 4 people attending the meeting. Zhenjin, ZD, Song Su, and Lan Zhao. A few animal skin maps were spread on the ground. One of them was the largest and was placed in the center. Zhenjin pointed at the largest map and said, This is what ZD combined with all the maps we have. All of them cast their gazes on the map. Up north, down south, left, west, and east. At the northeast end of the animal skin map, there was an anchor. Zhenjin pointed at the anchor mark. This is the starting point of your exploration team, and also the beach where the pig's kiss was stranded. If the situation doesn't change, there are still 50 to 60 people here. The first mate of the pig's kiss is in control of the situation. At the southeast end of the animal skin map, there was a cross. Zhenjin moved his finger to the cross. This is the place where President ZD and I landed. There are also 3 landing boats on this beach. From the cross and the anchor, there was a curved route. On the 2 routes, there were words or pictures at every certain distance. These 2 routes represented the routes of the 2 exploration teams, ZD and Tsang Su. However, these 2 routes did not converge together. Instead, they came to an abrupt stop midway. In the center of this large map, there was a large blank space. Zhenjin took out another 2 small maps and patted them on the blank space of the large map. One map depicted the desert terrain, while the other depicted the mountainous terrain. The focus was on the latter. On the mountainous terrain map, there were prominent locations such as the mine where the monkey-tailed brown bear lived, the spider forest, and the mountain spring. The 2 routes represented by the 2 exploration teams merged at the mountain spring. Zhenjin moved his finger to the mountain spring mark. We are now here. Our goal is to return here. He moved his finger to the northeast section of the large map on the picture of the anchor. No one objected. This island forbade low-level magic and combat energy, and there were many unimaginably ferocious monsters living here. They had to try their best to unite all the forces they could to survive. External help was unreachable and difficult to estimate. It was more reliable to rebuild the ship and set sail again. It was impossible to build and operate a ship with just a few people. The difficulties in front of us are obvious. There are 2. Zhenjin continued. The first is the ferocious magical beasts along the way. The second reason was the change in the landscape. What do you guys think? Lan Zhao replied in a deep voice, Master, if this place doesn't prohibit low-level magic and Do Qi, our strength will increase tremendously. But now, in order to deal with these strange beasts, we can only fight with our bodies. But no matter what, Huang Zhao and I will be your swords. Wherever your gaze reaches, there will be swords clashing. Lan Zhao expressed his loyalty. Zhenjin nodded, very satisfied with this attitude. Then I look forward to your performance. When ZD heard this, she seemed to be keenly aware of something. She looked at Lan Zhao with a puzzled expression. Your words are a bit strange. If low-level magic and Do Qi are not prohibited here, then those ferocious beasts will be able to use all kinds of magic. We are strong, but they will also be more of a threat than they are now. According to my speculation, that is not the case, Lady ZD. Tsang Su said, I think that the magical beasts on this island cannot use any kind of magic. Oh, why do you think so? ZD continued to ask. Tsang Su didn't directly answer, but looked at Zhenjin. My lord, did you find any magic crystals among the corpses of the magical beasts you killed? Zhenjin shook his head. So far, not a single magic crystal has been found. This was obviously abnormal. Tsang Su nodded. Although we did not kill any silver-level beasts along the way, but we did get a lot of bronze-level and iron-level magical beast corpses. But we have never seen the existence of magic crystals. Why is that? The formation of magic crystals is a result of the magical beasts living in an elemental environment for a long time. As they grow and eat, the magical power in their bodies will continue to accumulate and eventually form a magic crystal. Magic crystals not only store most of the magical power in the magical beast's bodies, but also help the magical beast stabilize and mobilize their magical power. Generally speaking, the stronger the magical beast, the higher the quality of the magic crystal in its body. Zhenjin and ZD didn't have any objections to Tsang Su's words. This was common sense. Then Tsang Su expressed his opinion. I think that the magical beasts living on this island have chaotic magical power in their bodies. They can't coordinate their magical power and make their own magical power stable and orderly. Because of this, the magical beasts can't control the magical power in their bodies. The magical power is chaotic and can't form magic crystals. Zidthi nodded slightly, then shook her head slightly. The magical power is chaotic and can't form magic crystals. But this is only one of the reasons why magic crystals can't be formed. The key is, Mr. Tsang Su, how did you determine that the magical power in these magical beasts is chaotic? ZD couldn't help but be suspicious. ZD herself was a black iron mage, but she couldn't use magic here, so she couldn't investigate the magical power in the magical beast bodies. Sang-Soo was just an ordinary person, not even a magic apprentice. What means of measurement could he have? Facing ZD's suspicion and questioning, Sang-Soo was calm and collected. I calculated it. Then, the old scholar threw out a new opinion. First of all, I think that these magical beasts on this island are not natural. They're all man-made. Man-made magical beasts? Junjin and ZD looked at each other and saw the surprise in each other's eyes. As for Lan Zhao on the side, he probably heard Sang-Soo's judgment a long time ago and didn't show the slightest bit of surprise. Then, how do you determine that these magical beasts are not natural? Or are they man-made? Junjin asked. Sang-Soo slowly explained, since I came to this island, I dissected many magical beasts and found that although they have a stable circulation and their organs cooperate closely, as if they were born this way, they are actually not natural. ZD frowned slightly, pondering Sang-Soo's words. Not natural? Yes. The old scholar nodded, his eyes deep. They all lack the charm of nature. Don't you think that these magical beasts are pieced together? ZD muttered. I once dealt with the corpse of a brown monkey-tail bear. It was a silver-ranked beast that died at the hands of Lord Jinjin. It had the tail of a monkey, the torso of a bear, and the palms of an orangutan, but the front of its fingers were hard and slender, iron claws. At first glance, this brown monkey-tail bear looked like it was pieced together by an orangutan, a monkey, and a brown bear. But in fact, its internal bone structure was very reasonable. It had 2 hearts, and the rest of its internal organs perfectly supported its physique. I'm a low-ranked mage. When I was studying, I put the most effort into potioneering. I've collected many materials and am familiar with the structure of most creatures. Although this is the first time I've seen such a monster, I think that its physique is very perfect. It's not some kind of disability, mutation, or useless body. What's so unnatural about it? Zhenjin's head jumped slightly. When ZD mentioned the brown monkey-tail bear, it made him think of the changes in his hands. In a desperate situation, his hands suddenly changed, turning into the sharp claws of the brown monkey-tail bear, and killed the 8-legged spider with a single blow. After that, his hands returned to their original state. Due to some unknown mentality, Zhanjin chose to hide this matter and did not tell ZD. ZD mentioning this now is also to show off my strength. Zhenjin immediately thought of ZD's intention. Sure enough, in the next moment, he saw Lan Zhao's eyes widen, looking at him with admiration. Lan Zhao praised from the bottom of his heart. Master, your strength is really strong. Lord Jinjin, your talent is amazing. Your bravery and battle achievements will be widely praised. Sang-Soo also added, and then looked at ZD. Master ZD, you are absolutely right. I fully believe in your judgment. Their life form is indeed very reasonable and stable. I do not have the talent to be a mage, nor have I come into contact with potions, but I have been fortunate enough to read many books. Among these books, some of them are the history of various families. These histories described in detail how certain noble families rose to power, how they managed their territories. Their early pioneering history was actually a struggle against the environment, a process of using human strength to tidy up nature. The content recorded in these books included clearing out the knoll thieves, resisting the beast tide, hunting the wolves near the village, expelling the wild boars in the fields, and so on. In order to guide the future generations of the family, the sages who compiled these books left behind many meticulously drawn illustrations, detailing the forms and habits of wild beasts and magical beasts, as well as how to effectively resist and kill them. It was because of these contents that I learned a lot. After some thinking with my stupid mind, I also came up with many superficial but interesting conclusions. From this, I also felt that the beasts on the island were not natural. I found out that beasts with horns on their heads are usually herbivores. Their horns are the main weapon used to defend against predators. As for the more ferocious carnivores, Their teeth are longer and sharper, their muscles are more developed, and they are good at running, especially in short bursts. Some of them even have pads under their sharp claws, which are more conducive for them to quietly approach their prey. At this point, Sang-Soo's topic changed slightly. Not long ago, in the place where the yellow algae had not found us, there was a hill. The forest was relatively sparse, the temperature was low, and occasionally the wind would carry a little bit of snow. That was the end of our current exploration, and there we caught a glimpse of a gold-ranked magical beast. It was an elk with huge white bone antlers on its head, like the branches of a tree. This elk ate meat and did not eat grass, and it also had a pair of huge snow-white wings on its back. I secretly named it the white-bone feather deer. Although it was a hurry encounter, I feel that its bone structure must be very reasonable and could support its daily activities. But it is not natural. You see, its body is not suitable for flight. A pair of huge wings at most allows it to glide. It eats meat, lives in nature, and preys on other animals. But it has horns. The horns are used for defense, not for attack, not for hunting, not for hiding. Let's take the monkey-tailed brown bear that Sir killed. When the monkeys swayed in the forest, their tails would maintain their balance, and when they jumped in the air, they would stabilize their direction. But does the brown bear need it? It is very heavy. What kind of tree can withstand it? Does it jump often? The monkey's tail is on its body. Does it make us feel a little redundant? Moreover, the palm of an orangutan is similar to a human hand, and the biggest difference with the claws of many beasts is that the orangutan has a thumb. This structure is good for the orangutan to hold on to the branches when moving between trees. But in the hands of the monkey-tailed brown bear, such a palm grew sharp claws. Isn't this superfluous? This is what I meant when I said it was not natural. Seeing that the people in front of him were deep in thought, Sang-Soo continued to speak with assurance. The first need of life is to survive. The environment of nature is cruel and harsh, and the beasts that can successfully survive and reproduce often have amazing survival skills. These skills are usually given by the organs on their body. For example, a mole. It has hard claws and teeth, and its body makes it very easy for it to drill holes. But it is almost invisible. In fact, it does not need to be seen because the soil is dark and there is no light. Instead, it is replaced by its nose. It has a very sharp sense of smell. This is life in nature. It has its strengths, and it also has its shortcomings. In its body, the advantages and disadvantages are unified, allowing it to find its most suitable position in the cruel competition for survival with other life. But let us look at the monsters on the island. They are too strong. Their structure is very stable, but there are contradictions and conflicts between them. Their position in nature is not clear. Just like the monkey-tailed brown bear that Lord Jinjin killed, does it need a monkey tail? It does not. Or the white-boned feather deer, does it need wide antlers? It also does not need them. The heavy antlers on its head are an obstacle to its hunting. Chapter 25. In the tent, Sang-Soo continued to speak with assurance. I served the Sand Tower family and lived in the desert oasis for decades. The desert is short of water, and there are particularly dry seasons in the year. Most of the oases dry up or even disappear. And where we came from, there was a kind of red frog. It would bury itself deep underground and drink as much water as possible. Its body would become several times larger to store as much water as possible. Then, when the drought came, they would not move at all, as if a bear was hibernating. At this time, they were unusually weak. They had no ability to move at all. At the same time, their bodies stored too much water, causing their skin to swell and become unusually weak and thin. However, it was precisely because of this change that this kind of red frog was able to survive the dry season, and the beasts that were much stronger than them were buried in the sea of sand. This is the charm of nature. The water-bag red frog has found a suitable place for it in nature. It has strong survival skills, but it is also very weak. To be able to survive in nature, it has already done its best. It has no way to grow claws, teeth, wings, and so on. The stronger the organ, the more nutrients it needs to grow. The more sophisticated the organ, the longer it needs to evolve. The competition in nature is very cruel, and the pressure is great. It will not evolve into species like the brown monkey bear or the white bone feather deer. If the environment is very loose and there is no pressure to survive, the creatures will be lazy, fat, and leisurely. There will also not be powerful life forms like the brown monkey bear or the white bone feather deer. Such species can only be man-made. ZD let out a long sigh. Thank you for your guidance, Mr. Tsang-Su. I truly admire your knowledge. Zhun nodded in agreement. Lan Zhao had long heard Tsang-Su's analysis and echoed, "If it weren't for Mr. Tsang-Su, I'm afraid we would have died in that desert." Tsang-Su continued, "Of course, all of this is just my guess. I have no evidence to prove it, but I'm almost certain that these strange magical beasts are definitely not natural creatures. Apart from the possibility of it being man-made, it could also be a mutation caused by some kind of mineral or spell." Lan Zhao couldn't help but ask, "Then who could create so many magical beasts? Which big shot in the Empire was it? Could it be a god? Only the gods have the power to create things, right?" ZD shook her head slightly. "Mages are also possible. As far as I know, legendary mages can modify and manage demiplanes. Isn't this imitating the creation of the gods?" Tsang-Su sighed bitterly. "Perhaps a legendary archmage, or perhaps a god in the upper echelons of the Empire, set up an experimental field of his creation here. This island was not small, but it had never been discovered. Its position was actually very close to the route of the Pig's Kiss. We were able to land on this island because of a shipwreck. It was a complete accident." Cyanobacteria's face paled. "This island is too scary. To be able to hide this island and create so many monsters, how powerful was that person? It would be easier for him to kill us than to crush ants. Strange, why didn't he just destroy us? We have discovered his secret." Tsang-Su whispered, "Maybe he isn't on this island for the time being. He went out, or maybe he doesn't care at all. Our every move is under his surveillance. He watched us struggle here as a form of entertainment. When we were about to successfully escape from this island, he would make a move." Lan Zhao couldn't help but lose his composure. "Then are we dead?" For a moment, the atmosphere in the tent was quite heavy. In the face of such a great being, any escape plan, even the young knight's grand plan, was a joke. After a long time, Zhun exhaled. "Mr. Tsang-Su's conjecture is thrilling, but I have to say it makes sense. Based on this conjecture, we can continue to speculate that the changes in the landscape here should be man-made. So, Mr. Tsang-Su, do you think this is a divine spell to move the land, or a teleportation magic array?" Tsang-Su said, "First of all, I personally think that the changes in the landscape are not targeted at us. It is too easy for the great being to target us and destroy us. There is no need to make such a big fuss. Secondly, compared to the divine spell, I am more inclined to believe that it is a teleportation magic array. We have personally experienced the changes in the landscape. The whole process was very fast. In a trance, we went from the desert to the forest. This is very much in line with the description of teleportation magic in the book. I think the changes in the landscape here are only because we were teleported. The landscape itself did not change. Otherwise, moving a large piece of land every once in a while would consume too much energy. Of course, all of this is still my speculation. It is like an ant guessing the scenery in the clouds. It is ridiculous and overconfident. Finally, I think that the teleportation mechanism that seems to have changed the landscape is probably one of the measures taken by the owner of this island to maintain the ecology of the island." ZD blinked. "Sir, how do you judge this?" Tsang-Su replied, "I have found that we are not the only ones who are teleported. Many wild and ferocious beasts will also be teleported to a new place." A bolt of lightning flashed through Zhun mind. The youth thought of the group of scale-horn panthers. The scale-horn panthers should have originally lived in the forest, but they ended up in the forest with a young boy and girl. Here, they needed to develop a new territory, so they first competed with a monkey-tail brown bear and then died in the group of blade spiders. ZD looked at Song Su. If these ferocious beasts are also teleported, then perhaps the owner of this island wants them to fight and select the strongest monster. Just like the alchemy puppet competition held by the Alchemist Guild, is it to cultivate the strongest life weapon? Song Su smiled. Lady ZD's analysis is very reasonable. It is indeed possible, but I still insist that the ecological maintenance is more likely. Don't you think that the balance of nature on this island is actually in danger? Although nature is vast and boundless, in fact, it has a fragile side. Every year, the Sandtower family will hire the Bishop of the Temple of Life to help them increase the production of crops. I have interacted with them and had the fortune to ask for advice from the Wandering Drool. There are all kinds of life cycles in nature. The simplest example is that plants grow out of the soil and are eaten by herbivores. The flesh of herbivores becomes food for the carnivores, and the feces of these animals become nutrients for the growth of plants. After they die, their bones disintegrate in the soil and become the fertility of the soil. Nature is full of this cycle of life. Even the most powerful predators will die in fighting each other, constrained by their lifespan and challenged by the harsh changes in the environment. The Sandtower family once had a continuous plague of locusts for several years. With the help of a drool master, the source was found. It turned out that the reason why the locusts were so large and difficult to control was because there were fewer bread scorpions eating their eggs. Why are there fewer bread scorpions? It is because in those years, the Sandtower family began to build the family cavalry. They purchased a large number of chocobos, and when these chocobos are raised, they like to peck at the bread scorpions under the sand. The cycle of life is like a chain. One link is linked to the other. They affect each other, and if there is a problem with one link, it is likely to magnify the problem and turn it into a disaster. Song Su said until here, then changed the topic. There are too many monsters on this island, and they are not naturally formed. For the ecology of this island, it is a huge burden to bear so many monsters. If we are not careful, the cycle of life will be broken, and it will cause an irreversible disaster. That makes sense. Zhenji nodded. He thought of the monkey-tailed brown bear. This silver beast ate ores as food, and from the looks of it, it had no natural enemies. If it was allowed to live, it would eat all the ores sooner or later. The ores that emitted heat had always had a major impact on that area. Once eaten, it would cause severe effects in many other aspects, such as a sharp drop in temperature. But in the end, because of the teleportation mechanism, the monkey-tailed brown bear and the scaly-horned leopard fought each other and finally died at the hands of Jinjin. The future natural crisis on the island was resolved in advance, just like that. ZD's thoughts spread. So, the reason why the owner of this island deliberately created jungles, mountains, deserts, snowy peaks, and other landforms is also to restrain these created monsters, stabilize the ecology of the island, and maintain the balance of nature. But why do I feel that he wants to filter out the strongest monster that can adapt to all environments? The girl did not give up on the idea of biological weapons. Song Su added, I think that teleportation is just one of the measures that the owner of the island takes to stabilize the ecology. There are other efforts that he has made for this. For example, the fire poison bee. Don't you think that this bee colony was deliberately created by him to prevent the jungles and forests from burning? There is also the anti-magic environment. The environment here forbids low-level magic and fighting energy. It is even stricter than the anti-magic ring of the Sky City. This is not like a defense mechanism because it is unnecessary to defend against low-level enemies. Instead, it is like shackles that prevent those monsters from exerting their strength. That's why I speculate that this anti-magic environment is actually a measure to protect these monsters. Please enlighten me, sir. ZD took the initiative to ask for advice. Song Su said, the monsters on the island are not naturally derived. Although their body structure is very stable, it is not in harmony with the natural environment. At the same time, the magic in their bodies conflicts with each other and cannot smoothly absorb elements to form magic crystals. This may be the aspect that the owner of the island wants to improve. He has achieved stability in the flesh and blood, which is an amazing achievement. But the patchwork body has brought about a problem in the absorption of elements. He can't solve it perfectly for the time being. Chaotic magic is extremely unstable. Sometimes it will cause explosions. Even if it is forcibly suppressed, it will cause magic erosion to the carrier. If the chaos magic is allowed to cause harm, it will be difficult for the monsters to live for more than a week. So, he created a special environment. In this environment, low-level magic and fighting energy are prohibited, which also protects these monsters, maintains their stability, and allows them to live in the world forever. Lord Jinjin and Lord ZD should know more about magic than I do. ZD nodded slightly and fell in a deep thought. Jinjin looked solemn. He analyzed the situation in a low voice. On this island, we found bronze level, iron level, silver level, and even gold level monsters. According to the current analysis, the gold level chaotic magic will also be successfully suppressed by the environment here. In this way, at least the sanctuary level can use fighting energy freely here. No matter how talented Jinjin was, at his age, it was impossible for him to reach the sanctuary level. P.S. I recommend a good book, The Calamity of Origins. It is also a fantasy novel, and the writing is excellent. Even if it was the most ordinary system, it still needed to have a burning heart to cheat. It is already 270,000 words. If you're interested, you could take a look. Chapter 26. Then, Lord Jinjin, can you use qi? Sang Su asked. Jinjin shook his head, indicating that he could not. He had originally discussed with ZD to hide the fact that he could not use qi. But now that the conversation had reached this point, there was no point in hiding it. But Jinjin still covered up the fact that he had lost his memories. Sang Su sighed. If someone can use qi of gold or below, they can overturn my guess. I actually hope that my guess is wrong. Jinjin asked in return. Then, Mr. Sang Su, have you thought of a good way for us to overcome the strange magical beasts and environment here, so that we can smoothly reach our destination? Sang Su smiled bitterly. Sir, you overestimate me. I'm just an old man with one foot in the grave. I have served the Sand Tower family for most of my life. The reason why I am leaving this time is to personally contact the Beastmen in the final stage of my life, to explore the unique ecology of the continent of the Beastmen, and to complete my academic work. I have named this work Theory of Evolution. I believe that although nature has always maintained a good cycle and balance, the forms of life that live in it are not unchanging. Whether it is us humans, dragons, wild beasts, or magical beasts, they're all slowly evolving. This evolution is closely related to the changes in the natural environment and the changes in the way life lives. Jinjin nodded. This will definitely be a classic work. Sang Su bowed and said sincerely, It was my misfortune to have suffered a shipwreck, but to have encountered so many strange beasts here makes me overjoyed, because this will prove my theory of evolution from another angle. Because of this, I took the initiative to apply to join the exploration team. The purpose is to be the first to come into contact with these beasts. It is my honor to meet you here, sir. During this time, I will serve you with all my strength, dedicating my mind to it. I have failed to meet your expectations, sir, but please forgive my incompetence. After all, I am just a scholar. I understand. Jinjin nodded. He could tell. Huang Zhao and Lan Zhao sold themselves as slaves, but Sang Su didn't really have any thoughts of relying on him. What Sang Su meant was that he would assist Jinjin to the best of his ability while he was on the island. When he reached the Orc continent, he would part ways with Jinjin and move about freely to complete his book, Theory of Evolution. If I become the Lord of White Sand City, I will definitely help you gather information on the Beastmen, Jinjin continued. I can't thank you enough for this. Sang Su bowed deeply again. ZD suddenly spoke. If Mr. Sang Su's conjecture is true, then whether it is this island or the various magical beasts, they're all modified objects. In that case, there must be a central hub on this island. What do you think will happen if we find this central hub? This was a very bold idea. Lonzeo hurriedly said, "Isn't that too dangerous? To be able to modify the entire island and create so many magical beasts, we can't fight against it at all. He's simply courting death." ZD smiled and shook her head slightly. "Actually, that is not the case. Everyone, think carefully. According to our previous analysis, there are two possibilities. The first possibility is that the owner of the island is out and not on the island. This is the best time for us to attack the central hub. The second possibility is that the owner of the island has always been there, but he didn't make a move. He is monitoring us, playing with us, or doesn't care about us. However, once we successfully escape from this island, he will definitely make a move to kill us in order to keep it secret. So, rather than that, it is better to attack the central hub. Once the central hub is destroyed, we can stop the teleportation and return the island's environment to normal. We can use magic and fighting energy, and those beasts will collapse because of it. This is extremely beneficial for us to escape." Lonzeo was speechless. Thinking about it this way, it seemed to make sense. ZD looked at Junjin again, her eyes shining brightly. "Lord Junjin, we are going to the York continent to fight for control of White Sand City. If we can obtain this magic technology, we can create silver and gold-level magical beasts in batches. Even if these beasts can only last for a short period of time, they will self-destruct. How much do you think this will benefit us?" In an instant, Zhang Jin's heart palpitated. How extravagant it was to have a gold-level subordinate. Also, the word mass production sounded wonderful. What was even more wonderful was that the magical beasts created were not afraid of death and would really fight with their lives. This would give the enemy an extreme headache and even make them tremble in fear. Zhen Jin looked at ZD's eyes. At this moment, the pair of purple crystal eyes seemed to be emitting the luster of gold coins. Zhen Jin's understanding of ZD suddenly deepened. The young knight couldn't help but think. This young girl in front of him was indeed the president of the Chamber of Commerce. In order to pursue the huge benefits, she was even willing to temporarily throw away her own life. However, Zhang Jin didn't express his opinion. Instead, he looked at Song Su. "Mr. Song Su, what do you think?" Zhang Jin showed that he valued Song Su. The previous words made Zhang Jin's evaluation of Song Su greatly improve. From the latter, Zhang Jin truly felt the great power of knowledge. Song Su's broad horizons, rich knowledge and experience, as well as deep understanding, seemed to have helped Zhang Jin and ZD unravel the mystery of this mysterious island. "My lord," Song Su said slowly, "I don't agree with Lady ZD's suggestion. First, we don't know the exact location of the central hub. To find the central hub, we will have to explore the island. We will have to face all kinds of strange, ferocious beasts, as well as the harsh environment. Second, even if we find the central hub, according to common sense, the master of the island must have set up a strong defense there. Will we be able to pass through the defense alone? If we rashly attack the central hub, will we alert the master of the island who might be out? Third, the existence of the master of the island, the changes in the landscape, and these ferocious beasts are all my guesses. I don't have the most direct evidence. Perhaps my guesses are all wrong. This is a very strange island, a creation of the heavens and earth. The power and will of nature are something we can never fathom. Fourth, although there is teleportation, there is a time interval between the activation of this teleportation mechanism. In theory, as long as we maintain the correct direction and travel fast enough, we can pass through the forest and other areas and return to the beach. Even if we are teleported again midway, there is a high probability that the teleportation will be random. Therefore, as long as we keep repeating this action plan, it is very likely that we will reach our destination. Zhen Jin thought for a moment, then nodded. Very good analysis. The central hub is too vague, and the risk is too great. We are not strong enough, so our first goal is to meet up with the main force and quickly build a ship to escape from this island. As you command, Master, Lan Zhao immediately said. Song Su seemed to be relieved. ZD opened her mouth, wanting to say something, but hesitated. In the end, she did not say anything. Pass down the order, rest for another 15 minutes, then we will set off. Zhen Jin ordered. Master, Song Su spoke again. This one has a small suggestion. Mr. Song Su, please speak. Master, please allow me to report to you a delightful discovery. Song Su pointed at the small map of the forest area. It is here, at the forefront of our current exploration. There's a herd of sheep living here. It is very large, at least 1,000 sheep. I strongly suggest that we hunt down this herd of sheep. This way, we will have plenty of food. Jin Jun frowned slightly. A huge flock of sheep with a scale of thousands. The young man looked at Song Su, then glanced at Lan Zhao. Lan Zhao immediately said, Master, it is indeed a large herd of sheep. We have already tried and successfully hunted 2 of them. They are timid and gentle and only want to escape. They are not dangerous. Many of the members of the exploration team think that this is a gift from the heavens. But our current food reserves are very sufficient. ZD said, that is the case for now. Song Su nodded, but we have to be prepared for many unexpected occurrences. For example, when the teleportation mechanism is activated, we will be sent to the desert area again. Song Su looked at Zhen Jin again. He knew that Zhen Jin was the one who could make the decision. According to our investigation, the leader of this herd of sheep only emits a bronze aura. Lord Zhen Jin, there is no need to have too many misgivings. This herd of sheep is at the lower end of the natural cycle. There must be many herds of beasts, and even gold-ranked beasts that eat sheep as food. That white-boned feather deer might be one of them. So if we hunt the sheep, the biggest risk is not the sheep themselves, but other predators. This is easy to guard against. After all, we are not going to fight against these predators directly. Zhen Jin muttered to himself and did not speak. Song Su continued. Lord Zhen Jin, the reason why our exploration team set off is mainly to gather enough food for the people who are building the ship. Although we have been lost on the island for many days, if we bring back enough food, it will definitely be a great boost to the morale of the people and will be of great help to them. At the same time, it will also help you. Zhen Jin nodded. This is a good suggestion. Then we will slightly modify the itinerary. Let's hunt the sheep first, then set off. According to his previous efforts, Zhen Jin knew that on this island where danger lurked everywhere, there were not many opportunities to hunt so easily. He might even give up now and not have such a good opportunity in the future. According to the plan, he did not intend to go deep into the island like he did now. So he followed the advice. Chapter 27. The herd of sheep bleated and swarmed down in a panic. There were hundreds of goats in this herd, and their wool was basically greenish-gray. The white-boned goat horns were like 2 pale sharp swords with a slightly curved arc. This herd of goats was originally leisurely gnawing on the grass when 2 members of the exploration team suddenly appeared and chased them away. The 2 of them held scimitars in their hands, but they did not use them. All they had to do was shout, and they easily drove away the panicked herd of goats. Zhen Jin, ZD, Song Su, and the others stood on a hill not far away and watched this scene from above. The herd of goats tried to change their path midway, but there were already people lying in ambush. At the critical moment, they suddenly appeared and blocked the path of the herd of goats. This herd of goats was repeatedly corrected and finally surged into a depression. The exploration team began to pull in the net, and more members came out from all directions. There were people in every direction. The goats realized that they had no way to escape and could not help but turn around on the spot. The members of the exploration team raised their swords and swung them down again and again, beginning to reap the lives of the goats. Just as Song Su had said, the goats were extremely cowardly. Facing the butcher's knife, they did not resist at all. They let out extremely terrified cries and then squeezed desperately, wanting to squeeze to the center. However, there were always unlucky sheep that fell to the periphery and were easily slaughtered by the humans one by one. Song Su looked at this scene and said calmly, "In the central part of the empire, many nobles have begun to enclose land and rear sheep on a large scale. They rear sheep. I once had the honor of visiting a few famous sheep farms in the empire. The scale was shocking. In my opinion, sheep do not have the ability to survive on their own. The reason why they can survive is because of the care and care of others. Sheep do not have the ability to protect themselves at all. Rams are more shy and timid than ewes. Even the slightest strange sound is enough to make them timid. Therefore, they live in groups only to relieve their fear. Not only are they cowardly, but they are also stupid. They do not know what danger is and cannot sense the arrival of danger. It seems that no matter what happens, they will stubbornly stay where they are. Even if it was windy and raining, a sheep had to lead the way if they wanted to migrate. As a matter of fact, the head of the sheep is also stationary in place, unless it is chased away by a shepherd or a shepherd dog. Sheep are very fragile. They could not walk for long periods of time, which could easily cause them to collapse. When they ran, their hearts beat too fast, and it was easy for them to suffocate. High temperatures or severe cold could kill batches of sheep. They are very susceptible to disease. Sometimes, just being fat can be fatal. Compared to sheep, goats are more active, stronger, and braver. But in general, it's pretty much the same. The habits of these two kinds of sheep are similar. Goats are attached to humans and like to be caressed by humans. It's very easy for humans to get along with goats. They're also very easy to raise, and all kinds of forage can be a delicacy for goats. However, sheep are still more popular. Because this kind of sheep had dense fur, it could be used to make wool and other textile materials. Especially in recent years, the textile machinery of the empire seems to have undergone a huge technological innovation. The Sandtower family is also very interested in the sheep business and sent me to the central part of the empire to investigate. Unfortunately, the nobles of the empire have the intention to monopolize the latest textile machinery. At the same time, the desert land is scarce, the environment is harsh, and the temperature difference between day and night is huge. It's impossible to use it to raise sheep on a large scale. While they were talking, more than half of the sheep had already been slaughtered. Among the team members, Huang Chao was the most eye-catching. He held a long spear in his hand, and every time he attacked, it would pierce through 3 or 4 goats. He had the strength of a bronze level, and although he could not use his Do Chi, his physical strength that far exceeded that of a normal person was undoubtedly revealed at this moment. Zheng Jin handed over the first mission of encircling and suppressing the sheep to him. With the goal of redeeming himself, and knowing that his every move was being watched by his master, Huang Chao put in a lot of effort. But in the next moment, his long spear that had always been successful was blocked for the first time. It turned out that the head of the sheep was finally forced into a corner and started to resist. The head of the sheep was twice the size of the surrounding goats, almost the size of a pony, and its body was overflowing with the aura of a bronze level. The head of the sheep moved its 4 hooves, aimed at Huang Chao's direction, lowered its head, revealed its sharp white bone horns, and started to charge. Da-da-da. The sheep's hooves stepped on the mountain, producing a series of rapid and crisp sounds. It was one thing to be motionless, but when it moved, it was astonishing. Head sheep, who was always slow, actually exploded with a speed that made people's expressions change. Huang Chao clenched his teeth, held the long spear horizontally in front of his chest, and stood still. Lan Zhao, who was standing behind Zheng Jin, saw his brother's intention and immediately shouted angrily, "Idiot, quickly dodge. You can't use your Do Chi." Huang Chao's ears moved slightly. He heard his brother's warning, but he clenched his teeth and did not move. If I run away again, what kind of impression will I leave on Master? Brother, you're the idiot. This time, I will wash away the shame. Shouting in his heart, Huang Chao widened his eyes and fiercely thrust the long spear in his hand. The tip of the long spear collided with the white bone horns. Then, under the intense change in Huang Chao's expression, the tip of the spear cracked, and the entire body of the spear was swung to the side. The head of the sheep rushed to Huang Chao's side, and at the critical moment of the collision, Huang Chao barely managed to hold the spear horizontally in front of his chest. Bang! With a muffled sound, Huang Chao was sent flying on the spot. His whole body drew an arc in the air, and then he fell on the grassy mountain rocky ground. His vision turned black, and he almost fainted on the spot. This guy, seeing that his younger brother didn't listen to his advice and was almost cut open by the goat's horn, cyanobacteria clenched his fists and asked for help. "Master, please let me help you deal with this goat." Zhenjin only looked at the field, his expression indifferent. "Pass down the order. Tell Huang Chao to restrain himself. I want to capture this head of the sheep alive." Lan Zhao's expression suddenly changed. He wanted to say something, but Song Su raised his hand to stop him. Song Su laughed. To be able to gain the trust of the Lord Zhenjin, Huang Chao finally has a chance to wash away his shame. He clearly knows that in a situation where he can't use his Do Qi, his strength is no match for the head of the sheep, but he still chose to risk it. Now that he was sent flying and fell, he should know that he should adjust his state of mind. When Lan Zhao heard this, he suddenly quivered, half kneeling on the ground. "Master is benevolent and magnanimous. You already saw that Huang Chao's state of mind was unbalanced. You repeatedly gave him opportunities to adjust his state of mind and let him redeem himself. This lowly one was muddle-headed. Please punish me." Zhenjin smiled and looked at Lan Zhao. "You two have a deep brotherly relationship. What's wrong with that? Go to the side and watch. After all, Huang Chao's body is still weak. If he fails to capture the sheep alive, you can take care of it for him." Lan Zhao was immediately moved to tears, kneeling on the ground, his forehead hitting the ground, making a muffled sound, and then hurriedly ran down the hill. In the depression, Huang Chao had already picked up a brand new spear and was preparing to attack again. Seeing Lan Zhao come over, he immediately became anxious. "Brother, why are you here? Did Master ask you to take care of it for me?" Lan Zhao coldly snorted and said, "Master asked you to restrain yourself and capture this goat alive. He gave you a chance to continue showing off. Only when you fail will I take action." Huang Chao was overjoyed. "That's good." When Lan Zhao heard this, he was so angry that he almost slapped Huang Chao's head on the spot. But there was no other way. He could only stand on the side and watch. The ordinary goats were quickly slaughtered, leaving only the battle between Huang Chao and the lead goat. Under the continuous charge of the lead goat, Huang Chao was battered and exhausted. Originally, Huang Chao had a certain amount of confidence in getting rid of the lead goat with the spear in his hand. But Zhenjin ordered to capture the lead goat alive. This made Huang Chao's hands and feet tied. Both Huang Chao and the lead goat were bronze-ranked life forms, but Huang Chao couldn't use his Do Qi. He had to be careful when using his spear, cowering, so the lead goat naturally had the upper hand. But Huang Chao wanted to show off. He didn't show any signs of retreating. After a moment of deadlock, both sides were covered in blood. The lead goat's body was full of wounds caused by the tip of the spear. Huang Chao, on the other hand, was burned and wrapped in bandages. Most of the blood on his body was seeping out because of the intense exercise. Lan Zhao was secretly anxious. He wanted to take action again and again, but he didn't see his brother completely fail, so he could only resist this impulse. The lead goat charged over, and Huang Chao's physical strength was severely reduced. Although he barely avoided it this time, he was powerless to chase after it. This time, the lead goat didn't turn around and continue to fight with Huang Chao. Instead, it rushed out of the encirclement. The surrounding exploration team members were all of ordinary combat strength. They cried out in alarm and retreated one after another, not daring to use their flesh and blood to stop the lead goat who was running for his life. Lan Zhao was about to take action when he suddenly heard Zhenjin's voice. "Enough! All of you step back. Let me do it. Master, I can still fight. Huang Chao whispered, his face full of unwillingness. You idiot, hurry up and get down. Don't ruin Master's mood. Lan Zhao scolded angrily. Everyone's eyes were focused on Jinjin. Ever since Jinjin became the leader of this exploration team, most people were secretly guessing what level Lord Jinjin's strength was at. Was it silver or gold? This island strictly prohibited low-level magic and Do Qi. So could Lord Jinjin use his own Do Qi? Song Su's guess was too terrifying. It was only limited to the upper echelons of the exploration team, and not everyone knew about it. The goat charged over, but Jinjin's face was calm and collected. Seeing that the goat's horns were about to stab Jinjin, the young man suddenly reached out and accurately grabbed two of the goat's horns at the critical moment. Then, Jinjin pressed down hard. The lead goat's momentum came to an abrupt halt, and its entire head was pressed to the ground by Jinjin. The strong and powerful goat's legs kicked wildly, kicking the grass and soil into the air. But from beginning to end, Jinjin's hands were as steady as mountains, and his entire body was like cast iron, not shaken at all. It gave people the feeling that the lead goat was suddenly as weak as a little chick in front of Jinjin. Exclamations came from the mouths of the crowd, and then turned into shouts and cheers. Huang Chao couldn't help but widen his eyes. Jinjin didn't use his Do Qi, and just used his own strength to firmly suppress the lead goat. This kind of strength convinced Huang Chao wholeheartedly. Song Su was also quietly moved by this scene. He knew very well that the body structure of humans and animals were not the same. When a person didn't use his Do Qi and just relied on his own body, it was actually very difficult to compare with a life form of the same level. Humans naturally couldn't run as fast as horses, nor could they nimbly climb trees like monkeys, nor could they fly in the sky like birds, nor could they breathe and swim underwater like fish. Compared to many wild beasts, the most prominent advantage of humans was their intelligence. A human's strength, speed, physique, and so on were not enough to look at among the wild beasts. Therefore, a strong person with silver Do Qi, if he didn't use his Do Qi and just relied on his own strength, it was very likely that he would lose to a bronze magical beast. This kind of physical quality, the scene in front of him made Song Su speculate. Could it be that Lord Jinjin really has the cultivation of gold? Chapter 28. Song Su was a scholar who had served the Santower family for 38 years, so he was very clear about the strength of transcendence. A silver-ranked battle chi practitioner, if they did not use battle chi, could lift up to 350 kilograms of objects and punch out 800 kilograms of heavy punches. It would not be a problem for them to fight against 20 or 30 ordinary adults. Their tolerance to the environment and pain was higher than ordinary people, but it would still be dangerous for them to face powerful crossbows. In other words, the physical quality of a silver-ranked battle chi practitioner was still in the human category. They were bound by the structure of the human body and represented the limit of the development of the mortal body. But after becoming a gold-ranked battle chi practitioner, the quality of battle chi would be greatly improved. Such battle chi would nourish and transform the body, completely surpassing the limits of mortals. Without using battle chi, a gold-ranked warrior could run up to 120 kilometers per hour and lift up to 10 tons of heavy objects. Facing thousands of soldiers and horses wielding swords, they could also kill generals and capture flags. Ordinary crossbows and arrows were not a threat at all. But facing a magic crossbow, there was still a risk. When a sheep was fighting with the yellow algae, Song Su saw with his own eyes that the sheep crashed in a tree trunk several times, knocking down towering trees. This proved that although the sheep was only bronze-ranked, when it desperately charged, the impact was very strong. It was far greater than the charge of a normal heavy armored cavalry. A silver-ranked battle chi practitioner, purely relying on physical strength, could not resist the charge of the sheep. However, Jinjin easily intercepted the charging sheep that had run for a long distance. The strength displayed in this was beyond the silver ranked. Therefore, Song Su could not help but speculate that Junjin might have gold-ranked battle chi. As far as I know, the blood of the Hundred Needles family is not good at strength, but it is unique in the aspect of accuracy. If a knight has a permanent support spell, such as the Bear Strength, he can also achieve this step. But here, magic is forbidden, so permanent low-level support spells should be ineffective. Or has he taken some strength potion? Finally, Song Su thought of the possibility of a gold-ranked warrior. If Junjin is really a gold-rank expert, with such strength and talent, the Hundred Needles clan will definitely rise again. Under Song Su's gaze, Junjin suddenly shook his arms, grabbed the goat's horns, and suddenly raised the head goat high. Then he threw it out. The head goat fell to the ground and struggled for a while before it got up. It had a dazed look on its face, as if it had been stunned by the fall. Then its eyes turned red as it charged towards Junjin. Junjin pressed it down again and let it struggle for a while before throwing it far away. After this happened a few times, Lead Sheep's unwillingness, anger, hatred, and other emotions dissipated. Instead, it was replaced by fear and cowardice towards Junjin. In the end, the sheep did not charge forward. After it fell to the ground, it stood up and did not move. When Junjin took the initiative to walk in front of it, it bleated and lowered its head. Its eyes were averted, and its bleeding body kept trembling. Junjin patted its head and then touched its horns. Lead Sheep was so scared that its body shook, and it actually took the initiative to lie down on the ground. Under many admiring gazes, Junjin nodded with satisfaction and ordered, "Take it away from me. Treat it a little and feed it carefully, but don't let it be full." "Sir, do you want to tame this sheep into a mount?" Seeing that the battle was over, Song Su came over. Junjin nodded and asked with a smile, "Do you think it's possible?" "Of course it is." Song Su smiled and said with certainty, "As far as I know, the most popular mount in the dwarf continent is goats. Goats can trek through high mountains and steep ridges, and their skills are extremely high. 1-year-old wild goats can use skillful climbing skills to climb snow-covered rocks, and along the way, they can cross many obstacles that we humans can't surpass. But I don't know the specific taming method." Junjin nodded and asked again, "Among the survivors of the Pig's Kiss, are there any beast tamers?" Song Su shook his head. "I don't think so. It doesn't matter. If the Pig's Kiss isn't there, can't you find one in White Sand City?" Junjin patted the old scholar's shoulder. In this battle, he had obtained what he wanted. Subduing this sheep and taming it into a mount in the future was only a secondary part of the harvest. The main point was that Junjin showed his strength in front of everyone. He let everyone in the exploration team see his strength. His influence on this group of people had been greatly improved. The lesson of Huang Zhao's betrayal and escape once was enough. Junjin had already remembered the teachings of the Hundred Needles clan in his heart, and he even put Huang Zhao in front of his eyes. On one hand, he squeezed out his value, and on the other hand, he used him to constantly remind himself how to be a qualified leader. Looking around, Junjin let out a heartfelt sigh. This is a treasure land. To be honest, it was the first time he had found such a paradise on this island. When they really started, the exploration team was pleasantly surprised to find that the scale of the sheep here far exceeded the results of the previous investigation. For some reason, the sheep here were simply overflowing. There were several large-scale flocks of more than 1,000 sheep. There were even more flocks of hundreds of sheep. Junjin was hunting such a flock of sheep this time. The exploration team members began to deal with the dead sheep. First, they bled, skinned, and removed the internal organs. Then, some people began to cut the sheep, while others washed the sheep's skin and stomach. After the sheep was cut, it would be placed on the bonfire and roasted with smoke. In this way, the water in the sheep could dissipate, so it could be stored for a longer time. After the sheep's skin was washed, it had to be smoked, dried, and other processes. The sheep's skin could be made into leather clothes, and the stomach could be made into a bag to hold water. After that, the exploration team was busy here for 3 days in a row. Under Zheng Jin's command, everyone hunted another 3 flocks of sheep. Under Zheng Jin's personal command, even the bronze-level head sheep was subdued. Most of the adult goats were killed, but a portion of the lambs were kept alive for the time, being under Zheng Jin's special instructions. These goats were easy to feed, so it was not a big burden to raise dozens of lambs and the 4 bronze-headed sheep. This was the benefit of having more people. If it was just Zheng Jin and ZD, they would not have the time and energy to do so. On the 4th day, the exploration team officially returned. At this moment, the appearance of the entire team had undergone a huge change. Almost everyone was covered in a layer of leather clothing. The leather clothes were very simple and crude. It was just a simple hole cut out to cover the head. On both sides of the body under the armpits, there were woven vines that tied the front and back of the sheepskin together. The side of the green-black wool was left on the inside, against the body, and the side of the yellow sheepskin was turned outside. On the back of everyone, there was a huge animal skin bag, which was mainly filled with smoked lamb jerky. Other than that, there were water bags. Many water bags made of sheep's stomach were tied to the waists of the members. The food and water reserves were very abundant, almost reaching the limit of the entire team's burden. After all, there was a limit to how much weight everyone could carry. Huang Zhao was scouting at the front of the team. Zheng Jin, ZD, and Song Su walked in the middle of the team. At the back was the flock of sheep, mainly led by Lan Zhao. Other than the dozens of lambs, the main focus was the 4 bronze-headed sheep. At this moment, these sheep were wearing simple reins made of vines, and a lot of supplies were hanging on their bodies. The main things were dried meat, fresh water, tents, backup weapons, and so on. The entire morning, the team trekked through the mountains and rivers, moving forward in the forest. During this period, they only rested a few times, each time less than 15 minutes. At noon, they finally had half an hour of rest. The entire team was divided into 2 parts. One part was on guard, checking supplies, and so on. The other part sat cross-legged on the ground and ate lunch. Song Su led people to carefully check the front and back of the team. No one was missing. Food, water, and other supplies were checked. The flock of sheep, which was the most worrisome, was also very calm. Behind the cracked glasses was the old scholar's carefully observing eyes. He found that the people who were eating were very relaxed. Some were teasing each other. Some were eating while rubbing their calves. Try to relax as much as possible. And the people who were on guard all had spirited eyes and puffed out their chests. The morale of the entire team was quite high. This exploration team had set off from the beginning, and Song Su was among them. He had never seen these people emit such an aura of vitality. He understood the key reason for all of this. It was not the fragrant dried lamb, nor was it a relatively stable journey, but the young knight. Zheng Jin. All of these changes were brought about by him. His powerful strength gave everyone a strong sense of security, and it greatly increased the hope in everyone's hearts. Huang Zhao and Lan Zhao had become his slaves, and these days they had been working hard to perform. Although Zheng Jin had not revealed his Do Qi, his deep background and suspected gold rank cultivation made the brothers feel that their future was bright and brilliant. Along the way, ZD followed Zheng Jin closely, almost never leaving his side. She was the president of the Wisteria Chamber of Commerce. At the same time, her skillful method of making potions in the past few days also appeared in Song Su's mind. Song Su's gaze finally stopped on Zheng Jin. In most of his life, he had seen too many nobles, and now he was sure that among all the young nobles, Zheng Jin was definitely among the top few. He was talented, powerful, and even more commendable was that he was a qualified leader. Under his influence, the whole team was united and their morale was high. Song Su could foresee that the fallen Hundred Needles clan would rise again because of Zheng Jin. If possible, I would like to follow such a noble and witness his great achievements step by step, so that I can also participate in the rise of the Hundred Needles clan. Perhaps hundreds of years later, as a scholar, my name will accompany him and become one of the symbols of wisdom recognized by future generations. What a wonderful thing. What a pity. If only I could meet such a person when I was young. The regret in his heart did not show on the old scholar's face. He walked to Jin Jun's side and reported the results of the investigation in the same respectful tone that he had always used. Very good, Mr. Tsang-Su. Thanks to your advice, we were able to hunt enough meat and have such a plentiful store. Now sit down and let's have some lunch together. Needlework invited. Tsang-Su said, my suggestion is only secondary. If not for your guidance, how could we be in such a situation? Jin smiled. After getting along with Tsang-Su these days, he was more and more satisfied with him. Although this old scholar was an ordinary person, his brain was not ordinary. The direction of the team was decided by him. What he used was only a wooden stick stuck in the ground and the sunlight shining on it. Tsang-Su's attitude and actions were always protecting Zhen Jin's identity as a noble, which made Zhen Jin feel comfortable. His ability to handle matters was also very strong, and he was quite steady and reliable. The more he used the gold needles, the more proficient he became. If Tsang-Su had some strength, even if it was black iron level, he would be the best candidate to be a noble's butler. Unfortunately, he did not have extraordinary talent, which was a pity. Even so, Zhen Jin wanted to keep Tsang-Su by his side as much as possible. This was a talent. His knowledge was even higher than ZD's. ZD was a mage. Of course, this was also because ZD was too young, and when she was studying, she put most of her energy into pharmaceutics. Needless to say, Zhen Jin could guess that the reason why ZD did this was because good pharmaceutics often had huge market prospects and could bring in huge profits. The further away they were from the snowy peaks, the higher the temperature. The sun at noon was the strongest, and the newly made leather clothes began to have the effect of keeping them warm. Maybe it was because they had eaten and drunk enough, but everyone started to look a little listless. There were already people outside the team who had taken over to keep watch. No one gave any warning, and a fatal crisis quietly struck in such a quiet atmosphere. First, it was the cry of a young man in the team. Sir, it's not good. Those lambs are all lying on the ground. Motionless. They're all dead. What? Zhen Jin could not help but change his expression. This was really bad news. This batch of lambs was very useful. On the one hand, the exploration team could kill them as a last resort. On the other hand, if they successfully arrived at White Sand City and this batch of lambs was still alive, they could raise them and then tame them. In this way, Zhen Jin could cultivate some cavalry. Zhen Jin's plan was ruined. He immediately stood up and wanted to inspect it himself. Do you know the reason? He asked the young man who called the police. He had recognized this young man long ago. His name was Baya, and he was born a hunter. He took the Pig's Kiss to White Sand City to join the army. Baya looked flustered and hurriedly shook his head. I don't know. Everything happened suddenly, sir. Zhen Jin grunted and was about to take a step when a strong wave of dizziness suddenly hit him. He was caught off guard, and his body swayed violently, almost falling to the ground on the spot. He managed to stand still, but found that the exploration team members, who were still full of morale just now, were all lying on the ground. Almost instantly, most of the members fainted on the spot. ZD, Huang Zhao, Lan Zhao, and the others were still barely supporting themselves. What's going on? Everyone seems to have been poisoned. What kind of poison is this? Huang Zhao suddenly took out a dagger from her pocket and shouted angrily at the young man Baya. Everyone is poisoned. Why are you the only one who is fine? Are you the one who poisoned him? Chapter 29. Almost the entire exploration team had been poisoned, except for Baya. Facing Huang Zhao's angry rebuke, Baya's face was full of panic. He kept shaking his head and retreating step by step. Finally, he staggered and fell to the ground. It wasn't me. It really wasn't me. Baya shouted, trying his best to deny it. Huang Zhao approached him step by step. Suddenly, he fell to the ground. His face was ashen, and his expression was ferocious. He looked like a patient who had fallen into an ice cave and was soaked in bone-chilling water for a long time before he was fished out at the last moment of his life. "Why aren't you poisoned?" Huang Zhao fell to the ground, still staring at Baya unwillingly. He squeezed the words out from between his teeth. On the other side, Lan Zhao suddenly exclaimed in a low voice, "Ah, could it be that the owner of this island may move? In addition to killing all of us with poison, he also left one person alive so that he could go out and spread the news? It's like a big pirate. After looting a ship, he deliberately let some people go and spread their bad reputation." Huang Zhao still had some consciousness left. Hearing this, he was very confused. Who is it? Does this island still have an owner? Previously, Zhang Jin and the others did not tell the others about the results of their discussion in the tent. Even Huang Zhao was kept in the dark. Because the results of these discussions were mostly guesses, there was no direct evidence. If it was revealed, it would be a great blow to the morale of the entire team. It would make people worried and anxious, and it was even possible for them to have an emotional breakdown. Whether it was Huang Zhao or Lan Zhao, they all fell to the ground. In the entire team, only Zhang Jin was barely able to support himself and stand up straight. Even so, the youth felt his body getting colder and colder, as if he had fallen into an ice cave. Lan Zhao, who had fallen to the ground, struggled to stand up. He tried several times but failed. He glanced at Baya and suddenly stopped. He shouted, "I remember now. He didn't eat the mutton, not even a bite. This mutton is poisonous." "The mutton's poison?" ZD was stunned when she heard this. Before eating the mutton, she had clearly verified that it was not poisonous. "Is it related to the quantity? Are we poisoned because we ate too much?" Zhang Jin asked with a frown. ZD shook her head and smiled bitterly. "I've already verified such a simple possibility, but there could also be some kind of poison that I didn't detect." "Baya, did you really not eat a single bite of the mutton?" Baya nodded and stammered, "Why, yes, sir. I don't like mutton. I've been eating dry rations these days." Seeing Baya's performance, Zhang Jin turned his attention to ZD. If Baya was plotting something, this would be the best time for him to act. At this moment, Zhang Jin was almost powerless to resist. Looking at it from another angle, even if Baya was up to no good, it was too stupid of him to choose to poison him at this time. In the wilderness, having teammates around you could increase your chances of survival. The risk of escaping alone was too high. ZD had already fallen to the ground. Her eyes flashed with a thoughtful light. "Lord Jinjin, please come over. Use the dagger on my body and cut a wound on my arm, okay?" Jinjin nodded and moved reluctantly to ZD's side. He pulled out the hilt of the dagger from her calf. The sharp edge of the dagger lightly scratched ZD's tender and firm arm, leaving a thin and long wound. From the wound, ZD's flesh and blood had already turned green. Blood should have been flowing out, but at this moment, only a little was flowing out. The temperature of the blood was relatively low, and the red blood was mixed with a strange greenish-gray color. Jinjin immediately thought of zombies. He felt a cold air surge out from the wound and couldn't help but murmur, "Is it really cold poison?" ZD furrowed her brows. The scene in front of her seemed to be cold poison, but it was also not. Vaguely, ZD thought of something, but she couldn't really grasp the light that flashed in her mind. "I don't have much time." ZD could clearly feel her body becoming stiffer and colder. Soon, her heart would be frozen and completely stop beating. ZD knew that she had to make a decision as soon as possible. "Sir, red, white mushroom bottle cap." ZD pointed at the small leather bag at her waist with a stiff finger. Jinjin immediately opened the small leather bag, revealing the densely packed and neatly arranged small bottles of medicine. There were 3 bottles of medicine that matched ZD's description. Jinjin quickly identified them and found that the 3 were the same. He also knew that ZD had a good habit. ZD would try to use different sizes of bottles, corks, labels, and other elements for each medicine to unify and differentiate them. Opening the white mushroom bottle cap, Zhang Jin put the pinky-shaped glass bottle to ZD's lips. ZD opened her mouth with difficulty and Jinjin began to pour the red, viscous medicine from the bottle. After taking a small sip, ZD suddenly rolled her eyes and fainted completely. Such a strange change stunned the people who were still conscious. Jinjun's heart sank to the bottom in an instant. The only pharmacist was unconscious. What should he do? Take off the sheepskin. Go back, go back. At this moment, Sang-Soo's hoarse and weak voice was heard. After saying this sentence with all his strength, he fainted again. Huang Zhao and Lan Zhao were very convinced by Sang-Soo's words. Huang Zhao could no longer move, but Lan Zhao still had some ability to move. He immediately took off the woolen leather coat on his body. After taking off the coat for a few breaths, Lan Zhao had a clear feeling. It's working. I feel that my whole body is starting to feel warm again. Lan Zhao exclaimed in a low voice. It was very strange. The biggest function of the woolen leather coat was to keep people warm. Previously, when they were near the snowy peak, these newly made woolen leather coats made people feel happy. But now, after taking off the warm leather coats, it made the frozen and stiff body regain some vitality. What was going on? Zhenjin didn't have time to think too much. Although he didn't understand, he immediately ordered by it to take off the woolen leather coats on the exploration team members who had fallen to the ground. After these leather coats were taken off, most of the members who had fallen to the ground and hadn't fainted yet had the strength to stand up. ZD, Sang-Soo, and the others were still unconscious with their eyes closed. Carry them. We'll go back immediately. Zhen Jin's attitude was firm, and he didn't hesitate. Everyone who was awake knew that the matter was urgent. They tried their best to drag the unconscious members back the way they came. Sang-Soo, ZD, Huang Zhao, and the others were carried on the white-boned sheep. More than half of the sheep that Jinjin had ordered to be captured had been killed or injured. Only the 4 strongest bronze-level leaders were left. The rest of the lambs were completely dead. The more they walked back, the better everyone felt. Their strength gradually returned to their bodies. Although the temperature in the air was getting lower and lower, everyone's torsos and hands and feet were no longer stiff and cold. Instead, they became warm. Finally, when everyone returned to the place where they had hunted the sheep, many of them had recovered to their original state. ZD and Sang-Soo had also woken up. ZD untied the bandage on her arm and checked the wound that had been cut not long ago. She found that the originally greenish-gray wound had returned to the normal color of flesh and blood. At the same time, blood flowed out naturally. It was no longer as terrifying as the zombies from before. It was as if everything that had happened before was just a nightmare. However, the 2 corpses were still a cold reminder to everyone that everything had happened. Yes, the exploration team had lost 2 people. These 2 people had fallen into a coma and didn't wake up during the process of returning. Finally, when they returned to the original place, their life force had completely dissipated. I understand why there are so many goats here. It's because these are highly poisonous things. Whoever eats them will have to pay the price with their life. Huang Zhao's face revealed a frightened expression. This is a curse, a devil's curse. We can only stay here. As long as we are a little further away from here, we will be poisoned again and die. Everyone was discussing animatedly. They were all very frightened, looking at the goats leisurely grazing in the distance with fear. The morale of the entire exploration team had dropped very badly. Shut up. Calm down. At this moment, Zhenjin stood up, looked around, and shouted in a low voice. Over the past few days, he had already built up enough prestige in the team. At this moment, with his order, everyone obediently shut up and there were no more sounds of conversation. Zhenjin knew very well that it was not enough to just suppress them. He also had to ease and release the fear in everyone's hearts. Therefore, he continued to speak. With me here, what are you panicking for? Things are far from out of control. Don't forget, we still have Miss ZD. Not only is she a magician, but she is also a pharmacist with extraordinary abilities. Zhenjin seemed to have forgotten that ZD had just drunk the potion and fainted on the spot. However, There were many people who had seen this scene. On the way back, those who knew about it even spread the news. Could she really do it? Jean naturally understood the hesitation in everyone's hearts. He smiled confidently. Previously, we didn't know the cause of the poisoning. It's very normal to make mistakes in diagnosis and treatment. When using medicine, it has always been about the right medicine. Now that we know the cause, it's completely different. How can a mere flock of sheep trap our hands and feet? Everyone, I still have to lead you out of this island. It's too early to give up now. Everyone's perplexed and frightened expressions began to change. Jean had blonde hair, fair skin, a high-nosed bridge, and eyes like the morning stars. Just his appearance alone was outstanding and handsome. He was also the only heir of the 100 Needles clan, a holy knight of the strongest army of the human race, and one of the competitors for the position of White Sand City's lord. Even though he was only wearing a broken chainmail, carrying a spear on his back, and the long saber at his waist were all crudely made, all of these difficulties only served to accentuate the young man's tenacity and indomitable spirit. He was like the rising sun at dawn. The sunlight was not dazzling, but it brought people hope. He was also like the flag fluttering in the wind at the top of a white castle under the blue sky. As long as one saw such a flag, they would inevitably be attracted and led by it. ZD and Tsang Su looked at the current Jinjin in a daze and were speechless. Sir, with you here, there's nothing to be afraid of. You're a knight, a holy knight. This time, it's you who saved us. Baya shouted excitedly, breaking the silence. Master, us two brothers will follow you to death, no matter when or where, no matter if the sky falls or the earth sinks. Lan Zhao also expressed his loyalty. The crowd gradually became noisy. Lord Jinjin is right. Follow Lord Jinjin. We will definitely be able to escape from here. That's right. I entrust my life to you, sir. Chapter 30. Jinjin looked around and saw that everyone had calmed down. Their eyes flashed with hope, and he was slightly relieved. Then, he ordered Huang Zhao to lead everyone to rebuild the camp. At the same time, they set up a perimeter and set up defensive traps. In the tent, Jean, Tsang Su, ZD, and Lan Zhao gathered together again. Tsang Su was the first to open his mouth and admit his mistake. This is all my fault. I didn't expect that the meat of the goats would be poisonous. I was blinded by the benefits in front of me. When I discovered that the goats were too big, I should have realized that something was wrong and be vigilant of the possible risks. Jean shook his head slightly and comforted him. This island is dangerous and strange. We all want to get more food. This isn't your fault alone, Mr. Tsang Su. As the leader, it's even harder for me to escape the blame. However, there's no point in dwelling on these mistakes now. Think carefully. How can we solve this problem? Tsang Su sighed and expressed his opinion. Now that everyone is suffering from the cold poison, this cold poison is very strange. On the surface, as long as we leave this place for a certain distance, the cold poison will act up. But in fact, I think it's because of the temperature. This place is close to the snowy peak. The temperature is lower, and the cold poison doesn't act up. After we leave the snowy peak, the further we go, the higher the temperature. After reaching a certain temperature, the cold poison in our body will be triggered. There's a direct proof for this point, and that's the wool and leather clothes. When we take off the wool and leather clothes on our body temperature drops rapidly, and the symptoms of the cold poison lessen a lot. That's all I know about the cold poison. After Tsang Su finished speaking, he looked at ZD. Not only him, but Jean and Lan Zhao also looked at ZD. In fact, everyone knew that the problem involved poison. As a pharmacist, ZD had the most right to speak. Since ZD regained her mobility, she used mutton, her own blood, and so on to test the medicine. At this moment, she was holding a glass test tube in her hand and was carefully pouring a kind of particle into it. The test tube was originally filled with a blood-like liquid, but after the particles were mixed in, it suddenly boiled like water, and a large number of bubbles popped out. Finally, with a soft bang, The entire test tube exploded. The bright red liquid inside spilled onto the carpet in the tent. ZD didn't care about the liquid. She bent down, widened her bright purple eyes, and used her fingers to carefully pick up the small particles on the carpet. After a dozen or so breaths, she had collected quite a number of particles and gathered them in her palm. She examined the tiny particles carefully. Immediately, she keenly discovered that there were various cracks on these small particles, and these cracks were not purely transparent cracks, but had a clear gray color. Seeing this, ZD's eyes lit up. "Everyone, I think I've found the real reason." "Oh, what kind of cold poison is it?" Jinjin asked. ZD shook her head slightly. "Actually, goat meat doesn't have any cold poison. Before eating the goat meat, for safety's sake, I've already tested it in many ways. The results weren't wrong. The goat meat is indeed not poisonous." Everyone was puzzled. Then what's wrong with us? Could it be that something else poisoned us? ZD shook her head again. "It's the goat meat that caused the problem." Jinjin and Lan Zhao's faces were even more puzzled. But Song Su's mind flashed, and he blurted out, "Could it be that the magic power is out of balance?" "Yes, that's the reason." ZD sighed, and then explained in detail. "This place is close to the snowy peaks, and the surrounding environment has a high concentration of frost elements. The goat herds live and reproduce here, and the frost elements in the air seep into their bodies. If these goats are natural creatures, their bodies can coordinate magic power and accumulate magic power in an orderly manner. When this stable magic power accumulates more and more, it will change qualitatively and condense into magic crystals. But according to our previous conjecture, these goats are man-made creatures. Although their flesh and blood structure is stable, they don't have the ability to coordinate magic power. They have always been protected by the anti-magic environment. The frost elements in the goats' bodies can't be perfectly and naturally digested and absorbed. Although they can be converted into magic power, this kind of magic power is very chaotic and contradictory. Not only can it not form magic crystals, but it also has a special characteristic, which is that when the temperature is low, it is relatively stable and quietly lurks in the body. When the temperature reaches a certain level, it will suddenly erupt, forming symptoms similar to cold poison. I thought I was suffering from cold poison, so I took an antidote made with fire element materials. As a result, the fire element magic power in the antidote stimulated the ice element magic power even more. Under the two conflicting effects, I passed out on the spot. ZD paused and then continued. "Because of this, after we take off the wool and leather clothes, our body temperature quickly drops, and the ice element magic power tends to stabilize and converge, so our condition quickly improves. So that's how it is." Hearing this analysis, everyone couldn't help but be enlightened. This kind of situation was actually very common in the cultivation of extraordinaries. For example, when a mage made a mistake during meditation, the ice element conversion magic power was not successful. After eroding the whole body, the body would be poisoned by cold poison, and even the whole body would be frozen. Chi cultivators, such as warriors, knights, swordsmen, and so on, ate magic beast meat or took potions, but they couldn't digest the huge amount of magic power in it, and it would also cause a backlash. Not only for cultivators, this kind of phenomenon was even more common in nature. If the murlocs who lived in the sea for a long time entered the desert during the day, their skin would become dry and even cracked, and their spirit would become sluggish, and so on. This was because the desert during the day was full of fire element, light element, and so on. Immersed in such an environment, the murlocs would inevitably absorb light element and fire element. Although these elements were not actively absorbed, they formed magic power on the surface of the skin. These magic powers would conflict with the water element magic power built in the murlocs' bodies, causing the skin to become dry and cracked, and symptoms of sluggishness. In the north, a lush sycamore tree suddenly ushered in a snowstorm. After the snowstorm, all the leaves of the sycamore tree fell, leaving only bare branches and many parts of the tree were frostbitten. This was caused by the sudden surge of the ice element, causing magic power erosion. Correspondingly, there are also many ways to resist magic power erosion in nature. For example, the pine trees in the snow could maintain the stability of their own wood element magic power in an environment rich in ice element. Another example was the rhinoceros in the prairie. In order to resist the scorching sun, they often rolled in the mud, building mud armor to resist the scorching sun. At the same time, it could also prevent mosquito bites. This was the construction of a layer of earth element magic power to replace their own skin, carrying out a war of attrition and defending against magic power erosion from the outside world. Wait, according to Lady ZD's explanation, isn't this mutton good stuff? On the surface, it looks like ordinary beast meat, but it actually contains magic power and can be counted as magic beast meat. Magic beast meat is an expensive cultivation resource. As a basic bronze elite, Lan Zhao was very sensitive to cultivation resources and quickly exclaimed in a low voice. Indeed, in the process of qi cultivation, the demand for magic beast meat was very high. For example, people who cultivated fire qi usually ate fire element magic beast meat. On one hand, magic beast meat was rich in nutrients, and long-term consumption would strengthen the cultivator's own life foundation. On the other hand, magic beast meat contained fire element magic power. After a qi cultivator ate magic beast meat, the magic power in the food would also seep into the cultivator's body. If left alone, this magic power would bring harm. But when the cultivator used fire qi, they could quickly absorb and transform this magic power, not only eliminating the hidden dangers, but more importantly, increasing their qi. Hearing Lan Zhao's words, Song Su nodded slightly and agreed, "According to what you said, there is indeed such a possibility. The difference between magic beast meat and ordinary meat is whether or not it contains magic power. It's just that compared to ordinary magic beast meat, the magic power contained in this mutton is more special. When the temperature is very low, the magic power is quite restrained, hidden deep in the body, and more stable. When the temperature is high enough, the magic power will show its chaotic nature, and the magic power will burst out, causing a threat to the life of the consumer. If there's an excellent ice element combat qi that can withstand and convert this ice element magic, then this goat meat would be valuable magic beast meat to these people. It's just that I don't think there are many of them." Jin Jin had a thoughtful expression on his face. Battle aura arts was a method of using battle aura to construct the coordination, balance, and circulation of the mana within one's body. There were many battle qi arts, and their quality varied. Not only did an excellent do qi technique require the creator to be extremely talented, it also required generations of people to perfect it. Those do qi techniques that occupied the top of the pagoda and were publicly recognized by everyone were extremely few in number. One could count them with 10 fingers. For example, the Shengming Emperor's Holy Do Qi, the Ice Howl Duke's Polar Snow Do Qi, and the Crescent Sun Sword Saint's Blazing Do Qi. The more outstanding the battle qi art was, the more efficient it was at absorbing and transforming the mana within the magical beast meat. Under normal circumstances, the magic power in magical beast meat was relatively balanced and stable. After processing, the speed of dissipation was not fast. This magic power was easy to sense, absorb, and transform. But goat meat was clearly not normal. Goats themselves were not natural products. The magic power contained in their bodies was rich, far beyond their level of life. The structure of the goat herd was also very chaotic. Most of them were ordinary beasts, and only a few were bronze-level creatures. If the magic power in the goat meat were to explode, it would be able to immobilize the bronze-level Lan Zhao and Huang Zhao. But when it was silent and restrained, whether it was Zhen Jin, Lan Zhao, or ZD, they would not be able to sense it. These two characteristics of the magic structure both raise the requirements of the Ice Element Combat Aura by a large margin. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.